Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world so bleak, so soaked in soot and silence, you might just feel the cold creep through your blanket. You're about to live one night, and then some, as a homeless soul in Victorian London. You probably won't survive this. Really. No drama, not a metaphor. Your odds of making it through a full winter are about the same as finding a fresh loaf of bread in a sewer pipe. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me your city and what time it is where you're watching. I want to know who's staying up way too late with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts with a cough, not just yours, everybody's. The fog doesn't help. It drapes itself over the rooftops like a wet, ghostly quilt, pushing its way into your lungs like it owns the place do. You don't have a coat, you used to have one. But one morning, you woke up and someone else had decided they needed it more. That's the way of things. You sleep, you lose, literally. You're lying near Covent Garden, pressed against a stone wall slick with mist. The only warmth you've got is the residual heat from the bricks that spent all day soaking up sunlight, which today was, let's say, minimal. Your trousers are damp, your shirt threadbare. You try to shift, but your back protests. Cobblestones aren't forgiving. London's waking up now. The city groans into mourning like a hangover that never ends. Carriages rattle past, splashing puddles up onto your legs. You'd flinch, but what's the point? Wet is the default now. One of the shopkeepers nearby is opening up, and you hear the clunk of bolts being slid back, shutters creaking open. The smell of baking bread wafts out onto the street. You hate how good it smells. That's the kind of cruelty only a city can pull off, making Heaven's Bakery open up right next to Hell's Alley. You gather yourself and stand, knees cracking. Your stomach cramps immediately. You didn't eat yesterday, maybe a crust if you count that. You glance down at your hands, dirt under every nail. One of your fingers is bandaged with a strip of cloth that was once part of your sock. It's not healing right, could be infected. You decide not to think about it. You walk, no destination, just movement. Sometimes you pretend that walking is a job, keeps your mind sharp, gives your day purpose. You pick alleys based on smell and warmth. One of your favourites is behind a bakery in Soho. The chimney vents blow just enough heat down the wall to take the edge off your bones. You share it with rats. At least they're consistent. The wealth of the empire is all around you, but not for you. You see it in the way ladies glide from carriages in layers of velvet and fur. Their faces pale and powdered, stepping delicately around puddles like they're allergic to the real world. You see it in the absurd top hats, the gleaming shop windows, and the occasional flash of gaslight reflected in silver-handled canes. You're a smear on the sidewalk to most of them. Worse, a threat to property values. Children are taught not to look at you. Even the stray dogs give you a wide berth like they know you're beyond help. You pass another one, not a shape, not a person, another soul, curled in a doorway like a comma at the end of a sad sentence. He might be asleep, might not. You keep walking. If he's gone, someone will check eventually. Maybe, or not. There's something strange about how alive the city feels, even as it crushes you. The smells alone are a kaleidoscope of contradiction. The tang of coal smoke mixed with horse manure, spilled beer, cheap perfume, and something vaguely corpse-adjacent. You don't even notice the stink anymore unless it changes suddenly. And that's always bad news. You cross paths with a chimney sweep, no older than 10. He nods. You nod back. That's the whole conversation. Respect between survivors. His face is so black with soot it looks like a mask. His eyes are red from smoke. You remember when you looked that young. It feels like another lifetime. Eventually, you find a stoop that isn't claimed. You huddle in it. You count your money, tuppence. Not enough for a lodging house, not a real one. Maybe a rope room tonight, if you get another penny before sundown. A coach thunders by, its wheels spraying street filth across your boots. You catch your reflection in the puddle. You laugh. It's not a happy sound. You look like a scarecrow that lost a fight with a chimney. The laugh turns into a cough. That cough's getting deeper. You've heard that kind of cough before. Wet, hacking, the kind that means your lungs are trying to climb out. You've buried friends with that cough. You reach into your pocket. There's a tooth in there. Not yours. You found it near the butcher's bins yesterday. Don't know why you kept it. Maybe to trade. Someone might want it. Weirdly, that's not the most absurd barter you've considered this week, so that's morning. Congratulations. You've survived to about 9:15 a.m. Historical fact. In the mid-1800s, roughly 30,000 people in London were estimated to be living without permanent shelter, many sleeping rough in alleys, graveyards, or under market stalls. Quirky fringe fact. Some enterprising individuals in Victorian London charged the homeless a halfpenny to sleep on warm spots atop sewer grates. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether Victorian philanthropic efforts helped the homeless or simply policed and punished poverty in disguise. By mid-morning, the city has fully come alive, and you hate it for that. The noise is relentless. Hooves clatter, metal rings against cobblestone, and somewhere a bell rings with the urgency of someone who's never slept on stone. A newspaper boy yells out headlines, too fast and jumbled to understand. He's got shoes, which you resent. One's too big for his foot, but still, shoes. Your stomach growls again. It feels like a trap door inside you opened and dropped everything out. Hunger doesn't even feel sharp anymore. It's just hollow, cold and hollow, and you know the look of that. You've seen it in the faces of people slumped on street corners, holding out hats that no one ever fills. It's a sort of quiet decay, like watching wax melt. You start the day's first ritual, the scavenge. There's a rhythm to it, like anything else. You walk behind stalls as they set up, keeping an eye on what gets dropped, what gets brushed aside. At one point, you snatch half a bruised apple off the edge of a fishmonger's cart. It's mostly brown and soft. You eat it anyway. You don't bother checking for worms anymore. A worm is just free protein, if we're being honest. Covent Garden Market is bustling now, all brass and barked orders and men in waistcoats that have never known rain. You dip into the edge of the crowd, eyes low, hands steady. Your trick is never to look hungry. Hungry people look dangerous. You look like you're meant to be there, at least until you aren't. You hover near the refuse pile behind a butcher's stall. You know from experience that they sometimes toss scraps, bits of cartilage, fat or meat too questionable for polite society. You find a bone with some shred still clinging. You pocket it. That's dinner, maybe, depending on how desperate things get. Further down the street, a woman is tossing out a heel of stale bread. She doesn't notice you watching from across the road. You wait, count to 3, and then move. The bread hits the ground. You're already on it before it lands fully. A boy, probably younger than you, but faster, darts toward it too. You both freeze, hands out, and then he steps back, lips curled in disgust. You got there first. Finders keepers. You mutter a thank you under your breath. To who? You're not sure anymore, but the moment costs you. A constable rounds the corner and sees the interaction. His lip curls, not in disgust, but in that smug, lazy way that says, "Finally, something I can hit." You don't run, you know better. Running makes it real. Running makes it a chase. He doesn't come for you though, just watches, maybe decides it's not worth it. Maybe it's too early in the day for paperwork, or maybe he's had his fill of beating boys this week. Either way, you walk fast, turning the corner and disappearing into the crowd. You eat the bread in 3 bites, not chewing enough, swallowing hard till it scrapes going down, still hurts less than the hunger. By noon the refuse piles start to grow. Merchants toss out spoiled produce, torn sacks of grain, and anything they can't sell before the flies claim it. This is your opportunity. You join the other foragers, women with sunken cheeks and torn shawls, old men with no shoes and eyes gone glassy. You try not to meet their gaze. Everyone here's got the same story, just different verses. Everyone was someone once. A clerk, a maid, a chimney sweep who got too tall. There's an etiquette among scavengers. No snatching, no shoving. There's nothing to fight over that's worth the energy. You find a wilted cabbage leaf with a slug still clinging to it. You shake the slug off. Or maybe you don't. Again, protein. In the middle of it all, a well-dressed woman walks past with a parasol. Her face twists at the sight of you. Not in pity. Disgust. Like you're something the cat dragged out of the sewer. She lifts her skirts to step around a puddle and mutters something about God's punishment under her breath. You want to scream at her. Ask what kind of God punishes people by letting them live like this. But your throat's dry and your anger is exhausted, so you don't say anything. You just keep chewing the cabbage leaf. You wander for a bit, eyes peeled for anything shiny, anything that might trade. A cracked teacup, a lost button, bits of wire. There's a whole shadow economy down here built on junk and hope. A rag and bone man might give you a farthing for something he can melt down or bundle up. Not much, but enough to buy the illusion of safety for one night. You pass a man hunched in a doorway, gently rocking and muttering to himself. His beard is matted with something that looks like blood but might just be stew, or both. No one bothers him, everyone gives him a wide berth. Madness is contagious out here. Not in the medical sense, just the slow leak of sanity into the gutter, where it floats away unnoticed. A few streets over, in Spitalfields, you pause near a stall selling cheap fabrics. You stare at the colours, faded reds, dull blues, sickly yellows. You reach out to touch a scrap of flannel, and this vendor slaps your hand away. Hard. Doesn't even look at you when he does it. Just turns back to his customer like you weren't even there. Your hand stings, but not from the hit. From the reminder. You're not really part of the city anymore. You're under it. Around it. Like mould. Like the rats. You slip between the cracks and live off what seeps through. As afternoon stretches out, you spot something rare. A cluster of school children in matching uniforms, all squeaky clean and holding hands. They cross the road with a chaperone, laughing like life doesn't hurt yet. One of the kids sees you and frowns. Then she smiles, waves. You wave back, surprised. She gets pulled away quickly by her nanny. Still for a second, and you remember what it felt like to be seen like a person. Historical fact. In Victorian London, rag-picking and food scavenging were common survival methods for the city's homeless, especially around markets like Spitalfields and Billingsgate. Quirky fringe fact, some children scavenged bones from meat markets not just for resale, but to boil and make crude soap. Open scholarly debate, historians still debate how much visibility the homeless had in public policy. Were they truly invisible, or simply ignored with intent? By late afternoon, you've reached that delicate part of the day when hope flickers, just faintly, before it folds itself away like a coat you can't afford. You check your pockets again. Still just the tuppence from earlier. No miracle penny has appeared. Lodging tonight is far from guaranteed. But you start walking anyway, toward the places where maybe, just maybe, you can scrounge your way into a bed. Not that bed is the right word. That's what the rich call it. What you're aiming for is more like a horizontal suggestion. The penny lodging houses are easy to spot. They sit crammed between factories and alleyways, painted the colour of fatigue, windows usually clouded by a thick film of smoke, damp and despair. Outside there's often a small crowd gathered early, some waiting, others just there to calculate who they might be sleeping beside if they're lucky enough to make it in. You recognise faces. A woman with her baby swaddled in rags, an old man with frostbite on his nose, a boy named Teddy who sometimes steals from drunks and sometimes cries in his sleep. You linger just outside the edge of the queue. There's no point getting in line until you know if you can even afford a spot. The going rate is 4p for a shared bunk, 2 for a leaner space, sitting room only, 1 penny for the rope room. You run your thumb across your 2 coins and do the math. It doesn't look good. A man stumbles past you, hawking up something green and viscous onto the cobblestones. You try not to look, but you know the sound too well. Consumption. Half the city has it, but it's only the poor who die of it. The rich cough politely into linen handkerchiefs and recover in spa towns. You cough into your sleeve and hope you don't bring up anything red. As you stand debating your odds, the door to the lodging house creaks open, and a man lumbers out, clutching a rag that might have once been a shirt. You catch the stench of the inside as the door swings wide for just a second. A mixture of wet feet, sweat, mildew, and the kind of breath that comes from rotting teeth and unspoken regrets. The smell wraps itself around your senses, and you swallow against it. Still you step toward the door. Inside it's worse than you imagined. There's light, technically, but it's filtered through grime and smoke. A single oil lamp flickers on the far wall, casting long shadows across rows of bunk beds. Each one is stacked with bodies, some awake, some unconscious, and one that you think might be dead but no one's checking. People are packed so tight you can't tell where one ends and another begins. The groans of tired limbs blend with quiet muttering, prayers, and the rhythmic scratching of lice being hunted. Welcome home. You ask the keeper at the door what 2p gets you. He laughs, shakes his head. Nothing left but the rope. You consider your options. He shrugs. Take it or sleep outside. Rope room's filling fast. So you pay. You follow the narrow hallway into another chamber, smaller, darker, hotter. It smells strongly of damp wool and vinegar piss. There are no beds here, just a heavy, sagging rope strung horizontally across the room, anchored between 2 iron posts. Everyone here sits hunched over it, arms slung across the line like drunks at a bar. For your penny, you get to hang on that rope until morning, sleeping upright. If you slip off, tough luck. No refunds, you find a spot. The man beside you is already snoring, head bobbing forward with each breath. He reeks of gin and mould. You settle in, arms crossed atop the rope, forehead resting on your sleeves. The rope creaks softly as people shift, settle, breathe. This is what warmth costs. 1 penny, 1 rope, and no blanket, no bed. Just the collective body heat of 20 other people trying not to die tonight. At some point you drift. It's not sleep exactly. More like a fog of half-consciousness. You dream of bread, then of drowning, then of rats wearing coats. You jerk awake once when someone falls off the rope and hits the ground with a wet thump. No one helps them up. You don't either. The night drags like a broken leg. There's no privacy, no peace. A woman in the corner begins sobbing. Quiet at first, then louder. Then quiet again. You try to block it out, but it seeps in anyway, like cold through a cracked window. You wake fully around midnight. A man is singing under his breath. A low, tuneless hum of some old ballad about sailors and broken promises. It sounds like sorrow put through a meat grinder. You stare into the dark and wonder if this is as low as it goes. But you already know the answer. There are places beneath even this. The workhouse, the grave, the river. The rope room is just a stop along the way. You shift your weight and try to make your arms into a pillow. It doesn't work, but you pretend it does. Historical fact: penny lodging houses, especially rope rooms, were widespread in Victorian London, offering the absolute bare minimum of shelter to the destitute. Quirky fringe fact: some rope houses would cut the rope at dawn to rouse the sleepers, literally dropping them to the floor to wake them up. Open scholarly debate. Scholars still argue whether lodging houses helped prevent homelessness or simply prolonged suffering in subhuman conditions. You don't remember falling asleep, if sleep even happened. It's more likely that your body just shut down out of self-defense. At some point in the early hours, your arms went numb, draped over the rope. Your head lulled forward into a sleep so shallow it barely counted as rest. And then, just like that, it's over. A loud snap jolts you upright. Someone's cut the rope. It drops away suddenly, and every poor soul hanging on it collapses like laundry pulled off a line. You hit the floor hard. No warning, no grace. The man beside you groans, curses, then rolls over and starts snoring again like nothing happened. You blink through the haze, feeling your joints ache from the position that they are forced into all night. Your spine is a question mark. Your legs tingle like they're trying to remember how to be legs again. You push yourself up from the damp wooden floor, palms sticky with something you choose not to identify. The rope room is emptying quickly now, everyone's scrambling to stake their spot out on the streets before the better alleys are claimed. You shuffle out behind them into the sour morning air. It's barely dawn, but the sky already carries that sulphuric grey you know so well. Another day in the empire of fog and filth. The idea of the workhouse crosses your mind again. Not for the first time, not for the last. You've heard the stories. Food, shelter, even a bed if you're good, but there's a price. Always a price. Not just the labour or the rules, but the stripping down of your humanity. No family contact, no personal belongings, hair cut short, clothes burned, identity wiped clean like a blackboard. You enter as a person, leave as a cautionary tale, and that's if you leave at all. They call it the New Bastille. Not because it's French, but because it's designed to imprison poverty, not alleviate it. You've seen the inside of one before, briefly. Rows of beds, all the same size, same distance apart, like graves waiting to be filled. The food was technically edible. Gruel, bread, the occasional grey slab of meat if someone made a mistake in accounting and ordered extra. You once asked an old man why he left the workhouse after just 3 nights. He looked at you with eyes that didn't blink and said, "I'd rather starve than be erased." At the time you thought he was being dramatic. But now, as you sit hunched on a curb, rubbing the ache from your arms, you think he was just honest. You pass a group of boys near a bakery, street kids like you. One of them is dabbing at a nosebleed with his sleeve. Another is trying to trade a broken pocket watch to a bootblack for a crust of bread. The bootblack shakes his head. Bad trade. The boy sighs and walks off, watch still in hand. It wasn't even ticking, there's movement up at the street. A woman in a bonnet and black coat is handing out small slips of paper. You edge closer. She's one of the do-gooders, ones who think they can solve poverty by talking at it long enough. She gives you a flyer. You glance at it. A sermon, followed by light refreshments. You already know what that means. Cold tea and 1 stale biscuit. Maybe soup if you're very, very lucky, but the soup isn't the point. You have to sit through an hour of lectures on temperance, morality, and why it's your fault you're like this. They quote scripture. They talk about your soul like it's a threadbare jacket they can sew up. You usually take the soup and leave before the hymn starts. No one misses you. You still have your bone from yesterday, you pull it out, sniff it. Questionable, but not dangerous yet. You gnaw the end of it, tongue pressed against the fatty bits clinging to the crevices. It doesn't taste like food. It tastes like memory, of hunger not being quite this sharp. You wrap it back in your pocket cloth. Rationing is a full-time job. Around midday you find yourself near a gate leading into a workhouse yard. You stand there watching. A woman is being turned away. Her child's crying, wailing, really. She doesn't have the right papers, or the wrong reputation. It's hard to keep track. The beadle at the gate is unmoved. He ushers her off with a wave like someone shooing a chicken from a road. She stumbles past you without even seeing you. You don't go in. Instead, you walk, south toward the river. The Thames doesn't judge you. It just exists, sludgy and constant and alive with secrets. Sometimes, when it's quiet, you wonder how many people have chosen its depths over another day of this. You've seen the dredgers haul up more than just driftwood. Bodies, sometimes. Boots with feet still in them. Once, a severed arm with a tattoo of a snake curled around a dagger. You sit at the edge of the embankment, legs dangling, the wind off the water cutting straight through your clothes. It's too early to think about where you'll sleep tonight. That problem belongs to future you. Present. You just want a minute where no one's yelling, stealing, dying or preaching. And maybe that's what makes this moment dangerous, because for the first time all day you let your guard down. You watch the river ripple, you close your eyes, you imagine a bed, an actual one, with sheets and a pillow. You think about what it would be like to wake up warm, to stretch without pain, to eat when you're hungry and not just when there's trash available. And for one moment, one stupidly soft moment, you let yourself wish for it. That's always the mistake. Historical fact, the 1834 Poor Law Amendment Act created workhouses as a deterrent to poverty, making conditions deliberately harsh to discourage reliance on public aid. Quirky fringe fact, some workhouses made inmates break stones for hours, then dump the gravel into the next yard just to keep them busy. Open scholarly debate. Many historians argue over whether workhouses were truly charitable institutions or tools for social control under the guise of reform. You don't realise how long you've been sitting by the river until the shadows shift and the wind sharpens. The air has teeth now, October is clawing toward November, and the city is starting to taste like winter. You peel yourself up from the stone edge of the embankment, limbs stiff from sitting too long on cold granite. It takes a second for your knees to agree to support you. For a moment you think, maybe I'll just lie back down, let the river decide what happens next. But instinct kicks in. You keep walking, it's either that or freeze. You head east now toward Whitechapel, not because you want to, nobody wants to, but because that's where the shadows are thicker and the police are slower. It's the part of London where crimes don't make headlines unless they're theatrical. People disappear here all the time, and unless their blood makes it to the sidewalk, no one says a word. But for the homeless, it offers what few other neighbourhoods do, spaced are cracked doorways, crumbling courtyards, forgotten corners where you might tuck yourself out of the wind and wake up with your shoes still on. Whitechapel has a rhythm of its own, darker and less forgiving than the posher parts of the city. The gaslights here are fewer, dimmer, sometimes broken. The fog rolls in early and leaves late, and tonight it's crawling in from the docks like a living thing, thick, damp and yellow with coal smoke. You tug your collar up, though it doesn't help. You're basically dressed in paper at this point, and that's when you see it. Another body on the ground. A woman slumped in an alley. At first, you think she's drunk, happens all the time, but something's off. The way her head is tilted, the angle of her foot. You edge closer, every instinct in you shouting to walk away, to keep moving, to pretend you saw nothing. But you look anyway. She's not sleeping. You back away fast, nearly tripping over a loose cobblestone. There's no blood that you can see, no signs of violence, just the unmistakable stillness of someone who's not coming back. You glance around. No one else has noticed. Or if they have, they've decided it's not their problem. And here's the thing, this isn't rare. You've heard whispers, stories passed like smoke between alley dwellers and street kids, about a man with a knife and a black bag, about women found with their throats cut and their insides taken out. Jack, that's what they call him. Jack the Ripper. You've never seen him, obviously. No one has. But the fear he leaves behind, that's real. That's carved into the bricks of Whitechapel like graffiti. You don't know if the woman you just saw is his work. Probably not, but it doesn't matter. Dead is dead, and being homeless means you're always just one shadow away from being the next body on the slab. You've walked past too many corpses in this city to count. Some make the papers, most don't. You cut through the back lanes now, stepping fast and quiet. The less time spent in open spaces, the better. You pass another group huddled around a stolen bottle, whispering low. They don't even look up. You glance into a broken window and see your reflection. Pale, angular, hair matted to your forehead with sweat and fog. Your eyes don't look like yours anymore. Ahead, a lamplighter is doing his rounds. The glow of the flame flickers across the cobblestones. And for a second, the alley looks almost romantic. But then the light hits something cuddling, too big to be a rat, not big enough to be a dog. You keep walking. The mysteries aren't worth solving. You duck into a narrow cut between two buildings. It smells like old beer and rot. You've slept here before, once, for about an hour. It's tight, almost claustrophobic, but at least it's sheltered. You sit down, hugging your knees, and try to pretend the bricks behind you aren't wet. Somewhere nearby, a baby cries. No one comforts it. The wind moans through the alley, like it's telling a story you don't want to hear. You listen anyway, not because you believe in ghosts, but because the living are sometimes worse. You've lost track of time. You pull your knees tighter. Your fingers are stiff and swollen. You wonder if you're getting trench foot. That's a thing now. Happens even outside of the trenches, apparently. Just needs cold, wet, and no way to get dry, so basically your entire life. You reach down and rub your feet through your socks. They squish. Eventually a man wanders into the alley. He doesn't see you at first. He's weaving, muttering to himself, drunk or just mad. Could be both. You hold your breath, hoping he keeps moving. He does. Leaves behind the stink of gin and a little blood. You don't ask where it came from. When it feels safe, you move again. Whitechapel isn't a place to sleep unless you're armed or invisible. You're neither. So you wander back west, keeping to the shadows, stomach twisting in hunger and fear. Your ears are sharp now. Every footstep sounds like pursuit. Every creak is a knife being drawn. Every cat is a murderer on all fours. This is what it's like to be prey. You pass an old butcher shop that's long since closed for the night. You press your face against the glass and see nothing but reflection. You hope your breath doesn't leave a mark. Historical fact. The Whitechapel murders, including those attributed to Jack the Ripper, took place between 1888 and 1891, targeting primarily impoverished women living in the East End. Quirky fringe fact? In the wake of the Ripper killings, some East End residents capitalised by charging tourists to see the murder sites. Open scholarly debate? Some historians argue Jack the Ripper was never a single person, but a series of unrelated murders framed by media hysteria and public fear. The sun barely shows itself the next morning, just a pale smear behind clouds that look like dirty dishwater. Your feet feel like blocks of stone and your joints crack when you move. You didn't sleep again, but your body keeps pretending you did, just enough to keep walking. It's what survival looks like now, moving forward without knowing why, just because stopping hurts more and more. The streets are quieter by the river, which means fewer boots to dodge, fewer constables to shoo you along, and maybe, just maybe, a chance at finding something useful along the banks. You make your way toward the Thames, not because you expect treasure, but because the tide sometimes brings up scraps. It's mudlarking time. You've done this before, you know the rhythm of the tide, you know where the best refuse collects, beneath Blackfriars Bridge, around the shallow curves near Bankside. The trick is to get in before the others do, not that you're the only one who knows. There are whole families who make a living, if you can call it that, picking through the muck. The shore is slick and treacherous, especially after rain. You climb down a rotting ladder, boots slipping, hands grabbing moss-covered bricks. The stench rises to greet you like an old friend. Rotten fish, coal smoke, sewage, and something else sour and organic. You can taste it on the back of your tongue before your feet even hit the mud. You scan the sludge. There's movement all around. Others like you, poking with sticks, stooping low, calling out soft discoveries. It's a quiet business. There's no shouting, no bragging. You find something, you pocket it. End of story. Today you're lucky. First, a bent spoon. Silver-plated, maybe. Probably worthless, but it might fetch a farthing from a rag and bone man. Next, a handful of rusty nails. Not exciting, but if you wrap them in cloth, someone might mistake them for something sharper. Then better, what looks like a broken tobacco pipe stem. You clean the mud off it with your sleeve and tuck it into your pocket. A collector might want it, or a pipe mender. or just some drunk who likes the idea of owning something fancy. You press forward into thicker muck, your boots suctioned with every step. A rat scurries past your foot, nearly toppling you. It's a fat one, soaked and twitchy. You're not sure which of you is more startled. Deeper into the mud, you find a shoe. Just one, left foot child-sized, still tied. You hold it in your hand and turn it over. No obvious rot. Might clean up well enough to sell or trade. You look around, suddenly aware of how many shoes are in the mud. Half buried like the river's holding on to them out of spite. You wonder how many feet are still inside some of them. There's a girl nearby, maybe 10, maybe 12. She's got red curls and bare feet and her skirt is hitched up to her knees. She's poking at something in the shallows with a stick. When she sees you watching, she lifts it up. It's a rat carcass with a bit of twine around its middle. "Trained it myself," she says, grinning. "Name was Buttons. He stole from the dead." She cackles and tosses the body into the water, turning back to her search like she never said anything strange. You move away, quickly. Time passes strangely when you're in the mud. The light never seems to change. It's just grey, then greyer. Then suddenly you realise your fingers have gone numb, and your pockets are heavier than your stomach. You climb back up the embankment, heart thudding with the effort. Your body's tired in that deep, damp way that makes your bones feel waterlogged. You find a place to sit near a fishmonger's cart that's closed for the afternoon. You empty your pockets, laying the treasures in your lap. Spoon, pipe, stem, nails, shoe. You look at them all and feel nothing, just the mild pulse of survival. A rag and bone man with a barrow comes creaking down the lane. You wave him down, hold out your finds. He inspects them with the practiced disinterest of someone who's seen it all. Takes the spoon, the pipe stem and the nails. "Tuppence," he says, already turning away. You accept, not mere because it's fair, but because you don't have a better offer. The shoe he leaves. "Too wet," he mutters. "Too sad." As if sorrow has a scent now. You find a spot in the sun, not warm but dry, and stretch out just for a moment. The coins in your pocket clink. 3p now, counting what you already had. Just enough for a leaner's seat at a lodging house, if you hustle. Your stomach argues. 3p could also mean food. A meat pie, maybe? Or a hot potato, or a bowl of eel jelly, if you're desperate and slightly unwise. You think about it, long and hard otherwise, but you know your body better than you trust your stomach. Sleep keeps you alive longer than pies, so you rise and start walking west again toward the noise and stink of lodging houses. But before you reach them, something else pulls your attention. A pile of crates near a warehouse, stacked just high enough to climb into, covered just enough to hide inside. You step closer, inspecting. It's dry, sheltered, mostly empty. Not bad. You could sleep here. You might get robbed, but you'd save your 3p. You hover. Decision time, spend money on shelter, or risk it all for a better meal. The truth is, you don't know which is worse, sleeping in a box or starving in a bed. Historical fact. Mudlarking was a real and widespread form of scavenging in Victorian London, often performed by the children and the elderly along the polluted banks of the Thames. Quirky fringe fact, some mudlarks believed the Thames was haunted by mud spirits, who stole useful items back if you didn't thank the river aloud. Open scholarly debate. Some researchers argue mudlarking offered a form of autonomy and resilience, while others see it as a grim reflection of urban neglect and systemic failure. You stand there for a long time with your 3 coins burning a hole in your palm, staring at those crates like they're a door to another life. You could slip between them and disappear for the night. No cost, no questions, just wood against your back and rats for company. Or you could shuffle back to the lodging houses and buy a spot. At least pretend for one evening that you belong indoors. The thought makes your fingers twitch. You shove the coins back in your pocket before you lose your nerve. Food later, maybe. Sleep first. The streets are starting to change with the falling evening. Gas lamps flicker to life one by one, halos of amber in the gathering dusk. Carriages rumble heavier now, filled with clerks and businessmen returning home to dinners of roast meat and claret. The smell of roasted chestnuts drifts down the street from a vendor's cart. It's almost unbearable. You close your eyes and breathe it in anyway. Like a free meal you can only taste with your nose. Eventually, you find yourself outside of one of the mission halls, a squat brick building with tall windows glowing faintly from within. There's a small crowd gathered at the entrance, all rough edges and hollow faces. People like you, people you recognise. You hear the low murmur of conversation, the occasional cough. A baby cries somewhere in the back of the line. You join it automatically. You've done this before. Inside, the smell hits first: broth, onions, damp wool, and something slightly acrid, like soap left too long on a shelf. There's a long wooden table at the front stacked with bowls. Behind it stands a man in a black coat and clerical collar, his hair parted neatly, his hands clasped as if in perpetual prayer. He's flanked by two younger men in waistcoats, both holding ladles like weapons. One of them smiles at you. It doesn't reach his eyes. The rules are simple. You sit through the sermon, you get the soup. No heckling, no sleeping, no leaving early. You're supposed to leave grateful, cleaner in spirit if not in body. You take a seat on one of the benches, wooden and splintering. The man in the collar clears his throat. He begins to speak. You've heard variations of this speech your whole life. The poor must lift themselves up. God helps those who help themselves. Sin is the root of all misery. Gin is the devil's potion. Laziness breeds vice. It's a performance, not a conversation. He's not looking at you when he talks. He's looking at some imaginary version of you in his head. A wicked pauper who could become a saint with just enough prayer and discipline. You stare at your hands. The dirt under your fingernails makes little black crescents against your skin. The woman next to you whispers under her breath, "Bet he's never been hungry a day in his life." You don't respond, but you know she's right. The man's voice rises in crescendo, like an actor delivering the last lines of a tragedy. Then finally he stops. There's a short prayer, a hymn, and then the real reason you're here. Soup. The line moves forward slowly. Bowls are filled, slid across the table. The soup is thin but hot. You take your portion carefully, cradling it like it's precious metal. Steam curls upward, fogging your face. You sit down and sip. It's mostly broth and onions, maybe a shred of carrot if you're lucky. But it's warm, and it's food, and for a moment you feel almost human. Around you, people eat in silence, Some bow their heads as if praying. Some gulp greedily. One man dips his bread into the soup and closes his eyes like he's at a banquet. You watch him, and think about the strange intimacy of this room. People who'd never speak to each other on the street sharing a meal because they've been forced to. It's a kind of communion no sermon can manufacture. Halfway through your bowl, a child wanders in from the street, barefoot, hair wild, eyes darting like a sparrow's. He can't be more than 7. The man in the collar tries to stop him, but one of the younger men ladles out a portion anyway and hands it to him. The child takes it, sits on the floor and drinks it down in 3 long gulps. No one says a word. The sermon's rules don't apply to him, apparently. Or maybe they do, but no one's brave enough to enforce them. When you're finished, you place your bowl on the table and slip out before anyone can corner you with a pamphlet. Outside, the air is colder but feels cleaner after the hall's mix of heat and sanctimony. You stand under a gas lamp, your stomach a little less hollow, your head a little lighter from the warmth. For a second you let yourself think of gratitude. Then you shake it off. Gratitude's a luxury you can't afford. Down the street you see a crowd forming around something. Maybe a fight, maybe a preacher, maybe a street show. In Victorian London those categories overlap. But you turn away. You've had enough sermons for one night. The lodging houses are starting to fill up now. You hurry. You don't want another rope night if you can help it. Your 3 pence will buy you a seat at least. Maybe even a bunk if you're quick. You walk faster. Your boots slapping the wet stones. Somewhere behind you a woman laughs sharply. Somewhere ahead a constable's whistle blows. You keep your eyes down and your pace steady. By the time you reach the lodging house, the queue snakes around the building. You slip into it and wait. People shift, cough, lean against the wall. Someone's singing under their breath, a tune about sailors and the sea. You wonder if it's the same man from the rope room last night. You can't see his face. Finally, the door opens. The keeper takes your coins. He doesn't look at you. You're just another body to stack in another room. But at least tonight you'll sit down to sleep instead of hanging from a rope like meat in a butcher's shop. Small mercies. Historical fact. Mission halls and soup kitchens sprang up across Victorian London, often run by religious groups who tied aid to moral instruction. Quirky fringe fact. Some missions made attendees recite Bible verses aloud before serving food, treating hunger as a test of memory and piety. Open scholarly debate. Scholars still argue whether these religious charities alleviated suffering or merely reinforced social control over the poor. You shuffle inside the lodging house and immediately feel the walls closing in. The air is dense, like stepping into a wool coat that's been left out in the rain. People are everywhere, sitting on benches, lying on floorboards, leaning against posts, their bodies folded into themselves like crumpled paper. You scan the room for a spot. Any spot. There's an empty bench against the far wall. You claim it, wedging yourself between an old man with no teeth and a boy who looks like he hasn't spoken in days. You sit down slowly, letting your body register that tonight. At least for a few hours, you won't be out in the wind. The bench is hard, the wood splintering through your trousers, but compared to the rope, it's practically a feather bed. You pull your knees up, tucking your hands under your arms for warmth. The noise in here is different than the street. Muffled, layered, coughs, snores, low murmurs, people talking not to each other, but to themselves, like they're afraid of forgetting what their own voice sounds like. The boy next to you stares at the floor. His hair's the colour of ash, chopped jaggedly as if someone used a dull knife. He holds something in his hands, a rag-wrapped bundle, and rocks it gently. You glance at it. Could be a loaf of bread, could be a dead rat, could be nothing at all. He catches you looking and curls his body tighter, shielding it. You look away. In here, privacy is measured by how much you pretend not to see. Across the room, a group of children cluster together like a flock of sparrows. They can't be more than 8 or 9 years old, each with that thin, restless look you've come to recognise. Street kids, definitely. Pickpockets, mudlarks, crossing sweepers. They're the ones who dart between carriages holding brooms, clearing horse droppings for a halfpenny from passers-by. Sometimes they get tips, sometimes they get kicked. Tonight they've pulled their coins for space on the floor, no adult with them. No one to tell them a bedtime story. They're already learning the stories of the street. One of the girls catches your eye. Big brown eyes, hair sticking out from under a filthy cap. She raises an eyebrow at you, a silent question, friend or foe. You shrug slightly. Neither. She looks away. The cluster of children settles down, arranging themselves in a kind of heap, using each other as pillows. It's strangely tender, in a city that doesn't allow tenderness. The keeper moves through the room like a shadow, checking coins, barking at anyone who tries to sleep in the wrong place. He wears a bowler hat indoors, a sign he thinks it gives him authority. His boots echo on the wooden planks. Everyone shifts away from him instinctively, like fish avoiding a shark. He doesn't beat anyone, not tonight, but his eyes promise it's an option. A small commotion starts near the door. Someone's shouting. You look up. 2 boys are fighting over a crust of bread, pulling it back and forth until it tears in half. One of them stuffs his piece in his mouth immediately, chewing like an animal. The other stands there, breathing hard, then slumps against the wall. No one intervenes. Hunger has its own laws. The keeper just sighs and turns away. You try to rest. You lean your head against the wall, eyes half closed. But the bench vibrates with every movement around you. Someone coughs wetly nearby. Another person mutters in their sleep, words you can't make out. The smell in here is overwhelming. Sweat, mildew, cheap gin, and the sour, sweet tang of unwashed bodies. You breathe through your mouth, but it doesn't help. Your stomach growls again. The soup's long gone. You think about the children you saw outside today, the crossing sweepers, the mudlark girl with the rat name Buttons. You think about how many kids you've known who just disappear. Some into workhouses, some into the river, some into jail, and some into nothing, like they've been erased from the city's memory. A flicker of memory. You were one of them once, not a man hunched on a bench, but a boy running barefoot between carriages, broom in hand, grinning when someone tossed you a penny. You remember the smell of wet horses and warm bread, the thrill of coins clinking in your palm. You thought you'd climb out of it someday. You thought everyone did. You didn't know yet that most never do. Someone sits down at the end of the bench. A woman, hair streaked with grey, shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. She hums softly, a tune you almost recognise, something about a lullaby or a prayer. Her voice is low, cracked, but it carries. For a moment the whole room shifts. The noise fades, the coughs pause, even to the keeper slows his pace. It's like a ghost brushing past your skin. Then it ends, just like that. The keeper barks something about lights out and a few lamps are extinguished. Shadows lengthen and the room becomes a dim blur of shapes and breath. You pull your coat tighter, what's left of it, and curl yourself as small as possible on the bench. Your head tips forward, chin to chest, moan. Tonight at least you're inside. Tonight at least you're not alone. Historical fact, thousands of Victorian children worked as crossing sweepers and pickpockets, often pooling their pennies to rent floor space in cheap lodging houses. Quirky fringe fact, some children in the East End formed informal sleeping clubs, rotating who'd got at the warmest spot in a pile for the night. Open scholarly debate. Historians disagree on whether the high visibility of street children led to real reform or simply fed Victorian society's appetite for moral panic and lurid stories. The bench doesn't become more comfortable, no matter how long you lie on it. Your back aches, your hips go numb, and your neck is stuck at an angle that feels like punishment. Sleep comes in broken moments. 20 seconds here, maybe a minute. There. Just long enough to forget where you are, and wake with a jolt when someone nearby shifts, coughs, or mutters in their sleep. One man lets out a groan so deep it sounds like it's escaping his soul. You wonder what dreams torture him tonight, or if he even dreams at all anymore. By some miracle the night passes without a brawl, no one dies, no one screams loud enough to summon the keeper, and the room holds together like a rickety ship in calm water. Still, as the grey light of morning seeps in through the cracked window panes, there's a collective exhale, as if everyone in the room was holding their breath through the darkness. You stretch your arms, feeling the creak in your shoulders. Your mouth is dry and your lips are cracked. You reach into your pocket. 1 coin left. 1 pence. The tiniest insurance policy against the cold. You could hold on to it. Or you could buy something small, bread if you find the right stall. But you already know what you're going to do with it. You've been thinking about it since yesterday. There's a place down on Flower and Dean Street that offers a peculiar form of shelter. No bench, no bunk, not even floor space. Just a rope. For a single penny, you can pay to sleep standing up, your arms slung over a thick cord stretched across the width of a room. The rope room, they call it. You've done it before, it's awful, but it's shelter. Kind of. And tonight, it might be the only option you can afford. You make your way there slowly. The streets are already stirring, the smells of the city growing pungent with the heat of the day. Rancid milk, coal smoke, spoiled meat. A woman dumps a bucket of filth into the gutter. It splashes dangerously close to your boots. You sidestep it with the grace of experience. You've walked these streets long enough to know where to stand and when to duck. Flower and Dean Street is no better than you left it. Maybe worse. The buildings lean like they're drunk, windows broken or boarded, alleys jammed with rubbish and rats fat enough to hiss back if you challenge them. But the rope house is open, and that's all that matters. You step inside and hand over your coin. The keeper, a man with one eye and breath that smells like pickled despair, nods and jerks his thumb toward the back. "Rope's still warm," he says, as if that's a selling point. The room is dim, lit by a single oil lamp that flickers weakly in the corner. The rope stretches from wall to wall, sagging slightly under the weight of the people already draped over it. 20, maybe 30 souls hang there. Heads bowed, bodies gaunt, limp, some snoring softly, others whispering to themselves. The air is thick, close, sour. You take your spot near the end, draping your arms over the rope and letting your body surrender to the weight. It's a strange thing, this position. You're neither lying nor standing, just hanging. Your legs shake from the effort of keeping upright, your arms throb from the strain. But eventually your body gives in. Your knees unlock, your forehead rests on your crossed wrists, and your brain begins its slow shuffle toward unconsciousness. There's no real sleep in the rope room, just micro moments of rest stolen between shifts of pain. Someone nearby coughs wetly. Another person vomits on the floor and doesn't clean it. The keeper doesn't notice, or pretends not to. You think about what it must take to become someone who doesn't notice things anymore. How long you'd have to live like this before the noise, the stink, but the suffering just fades into background static. A sudden yank of the rope startles you awake. A man 2 spots down has collapsed, pulling the line taut. He doesn't get up. Nobody moves to help him. Eventually his body slumps sideways and someone nudges him away with a boot. Space is precious. You take a deeper breath, instantly regret it. You gag out on the taste of mildew, sweat, and whatever died in the far corner last week. There's a kind of rhythm in the rope room. People sway gently, sometimes in unison. It's almost hypnotic, like seaweed underwater. You close your eyes and try to fall into that rhythm. You imagine it's music, something soft and slow, the kind of lullaby your mother might have sung before she disappeared into the fog of poverty and bad luck. You wonder how many of the people around you ever had lullabies. How many were born into this life versus dragged into it kicking and coughing. You wonder if the little girl with the rat ever found another pet. You wonder if the boy with the rag bundle from the lodging house made it through the night. You think too much in the rope room. You always do. Time passes strangely. At some point you drift. Not sleep. Not really. More like the lights in your brain flickering, then stuttering out for a few moments. You dream of warm bread and dry socks, of rain that doesn't hurt when it hits your skin, of lying flat, of silence. Then, with no warning, the rope jerks, hard, the keeper's at the far end cutting it loose. Standard practice. When the rope's time is up, it gets dropped, and everyone on it falls like marionettes with cut strings. You brace for it, and when it comes, you fall forward, knees smashing against the floor, arms tangling, someone else landing on top of you with a grunt. You push them off and roll onto your back, breath heaving. The rope is gone, morning is coming. You survived another night of not quite dying. Historical fact: penny rope rooms were real features of Victorian lodging houses, offering a place to sleep upright for the poorest of the poor. Quirky fringe fact: some rope room keepers advertised longer ropes for quieter sleep, as if that extra slack made the experience luxurious. Open scholarly debate. Some historians argue that rope rooms were acts of last resort charity, while others suggest they were monetized cruelty, profiting from misery without solving it. The morning after the rope drop is the kind of morning that doesn't feel like a beginning. It feels like a continuation, like a punishment on loop. Your knees ache from the fall, your wrists from hanging, and your neck, well, your neck's decided it's not part of the team today. You sit up slowly, joints crackling like damp firewood, and blink the crust from your eyes. The room still smells like breath and regret, but it's thinning now as bodies stagger out into the street, rubbing sleep or the closest available substitute from their faces. You follow them. There's no food here, no promise of warmth, no point in lingering. The streets outside are already stirring, carts clattering past, women sweeping stoops that probably aren't theirs, and boys selling newspapers with ink-stained hands and voices too sharp for how early it is. You envy their energy. Then again, most of them are half-crazed on sugar, tea dregs, bad or adrenaline from avoiding a beating. You drift along the edge of the crowd, staying close to buildings, avoiding the gaze of constables. You've learned to read their eyes, what kind of day they're having, whether they're bored enough to come after you just for loitering in the wrong square foot of sidewalk. Today they seem sluggish. One is nursing a hangover by the look of it, resting against a lamppost with his hat tipped too low. Good, you're invisible again. You cut down a narrow lane behind a row of shops. It's quieter here, darker, even in daylight. An alley cat stares at you from atop a barrel, tail flicking with disdain. You offer it nothing. You've got nothing to offer. That's when you hear the boots, not the heavy stomp of a constable, but the deliberate step of someone who knows how to walk quiet. You glance over your shoulder and see him, a night watchman, still in his uniform, probably working overtime or headed home late. He's younger than most, face smooth, moustache too carefully trimmed to have seen many fights. But he's got that little stick swinging at his hip, and that makes him dangerous. You pretend not to see him and keep walking, slow, casual, but he speeds up. "Oi!" he calls, just one word, but it slices through the fog. You don't run, not yet. Running marks you, running gives him a reason, but you shift direction, cutting down another alley. He follows. You glance around, no crowd here, no shopkeepers to witness, no window to duck behind, just brick, rubbish, and a puddle of something that used to be alive. You walk faster, so does he. "Stop!" he barks, and now you do run, not because you did anything wrong, but because this is how the game works. Sometimes they chase you because they're bored, sometimes they think you've stolen something, sometimes they just don't like the way you smell, does not matter. The end is always the same, your face in the gutter, and your ribs aching from a well-placed boot. Your feet slap the stones as you bolt through the alleys, weaving past crates, skidding through mud. Behind you, the watchman curses. He's fast. You're faster. Hunger makes you light. Fear gives you wings. You duck behind a stack of barrels and flatten yourself against the wall. Your breath comes in ragged gasps, but you stay silent. A moment later, his boots thunder past. You wait, 10 seconds, 20, a full minute, before you move again. When you emerge, the city feels different. The tension hasn't left your body. It won't. Not for hours. You walk with your head low, not because you're ashamed, but because eye contact invites trouble. By midday, you're back in familiar territory, a little corner near Charing Cross where a few of the older homeless men gather. Not as a gang, not even really as friends, just as a loose truce of silence and shared suffering. You nod at them. They nod back. No names. Names are dangerous. Names stick. Names can get shouted in courtrooms or scratched onto headstones. One of the men is feeding a pigeon, not his pet, just a regular visitor. The bird hops forward, pecks a crumb from his palm, hops back, over and over. You find a spot nearby and sit, legs stretched out, letting the October sun touch your face. It's weak sunlight, watery and pale, but it still feels like a miracle. You don't speak unless someone speaks to you. That's the rule here. Silence is the default setting. But today, the man with the pigeon says something. "You see the girl what died over in Bethnal Green?" You glance at him. His eyes are bloodshot. "No." 10 years old, they said. Froze. In a stairwell. Clothes soaked through. Still holding a doll. He doesn't say it like it's a tragedy. He says it like it's a weather report. Like it's just another thing that happens when you live this way. And it is. You've heard the stories too. Children curled up in barrels, babies left in baskets at workhouse gates. No one's surprised. That's the worst part. Death's just the background noise of poverty. You sit in that silence a long while. Eventually a woman comes by with a basket, one of the respectables wrapped in layers of lace and pity. She hands out little cards, scripture verses printed in gold ink, and biscuits as hard as your conscience. You take one, thank her, and she smiles like she's just saved your soul. You eat the biscuit slowly. It tastes like dust and smugness. The others don't talk much after she leaves. One by one, they drift off back into the city to scavenge or sleep or vanish. You stand too. Your legs feel like wooden stilts. You need to find a new place for the night. The rope room might be full already, and you don't have another penny to spare. You check the alleys near Covent Garden. Nothing. You try the arches by the river, already claimed. Finally, you settle for a wooden crate behind a bakery. It smells of yeast and ash, and if you sit just right, the wall blocks most of the wind. You pull your coat tighter and close your eyes. Tomorrow, maybe? You'll beg. Maybe you'll steal. Maybe you won't wake up at all. You'll let tomorrow decide. Historical fact: night watchmen and beat constables patrolled poor neighbourhoods in Victorian London, often focusing more on undesirables than on crime itself. Quirky fringe fact: some watchmen were notorious for renting out safe doorways or stairwells to vagrants at a steep price. Open scholarly debate. Some historians see Victorian policing as protective for the public, while others argue it functioned largely to control and intimidate the urban poor. You wake up hunched like a broken hinge, half inside the crate, half sprawled on the stone. Your neck is twisted, your hip is numb, and the tips of your fingers feel like someone dipped them in ice water overnight. The crate was a decent spot until the wind shifted around 3 a.m, and the smell of yeast from the bakery gave way to the smell of sewage. But by then you were too tired to care. Now, with the city slowly stirring again, your body protests every movement. You roll your shoulders, stretch your legs, and grimace as one foot sends a jolt of pain up your spine. It's swelling now, could be infected, could just be angry. Either way, you're limping today. The streets are busy already. Men hauling crates, women rushing to market, kids selling newspapers, their shrill calls bouncing off the bricks. You blend into it, another figure in the sea of soot and motion. Hunger hits fast this morning. Not that soft ache, but the sharp, urgent kind that makes your knees buckle. You haven't eaten since the soup at the mission hall. That was 2 days ago, maybe 3. You've lost track again. Time slips when your belly is empty, and your thoughts are just static. You make your way toward one of the only places in the city where even a pauper can take a pause. The public toilet. Well, a public toilet. This one's not marked on any map. It's half falling apart, tucked beneath a stairwell behind a fishmonger's stall. The door doesn't latch properly, and the floor is permanently damp, but it has 4 walls and no fee. In this city, that counts as luxury. You duck inside and latch the door with a bit of string you tied to the handle last week. The smell, of course, is horrific. Urine, mildew, old fish, and the unmistakable tang of something that died a long time ago and never got a proper burial. But you sit on the lid anyway, resting your back against the cold brick wall. For a few minutes you're not moving. That's what matters. People come and go. You hear their steps. Some mutter apologies when the door won't shut. Others ignore it and do their business right in the open air nearby. You don't care. You're not here for dignity. You're here because it's the only dry place you've found today that doesn't ask for coins or sermons. You take off your boot to look at your foot. It's worse than you thought. The skin's cracked open across your heel and between your toes, pale and swollen. Trench foot, most likely. You've seen it before. A boy you knew last winter lost 3 toes before he even realised they'd gone black. You press the skin around the cracks. It weeps clear fluid. Lovely. You wrap it again in the scrap of cloth you've been using for too long. It's damp and stiff. but it's all you've got. Someone knocks on the door. Not polite, not curious. The kind of knock that says, "Hurry up or I'll break it down." You mutter that you're leaving and push yourself up, groaning as you lace your boot back up. It barely fits now, squeezing your foot like a vice. You'll walk with a limp today, maybe for the rest of the week, maybe longer. You pull open the door, step past the man who glares at you, and re-enter the whirlpool of the street. You head toward the public pump near the square. There's always a line, but the water is cold and sharp, and you hope it'll wake you up enough to keep moving. As you wait your turn, you watch people. Not the ones like you, those stories you already know, but the others. The men with coats that actually button. The women with boots that match. They carry umbrellas. They wear gloves. They talk like they're not afraid of anything. You wonder what it's like. Waking up and knowing what you'll eat, where you'll sleep. You try to picture it, but your brain rebels. The idea feels ridiculous now. Like imagining yourself with wings. Your turn at the pump comes. You splash water on your face, cupping it in your hands. It's freezing, but it helps. You drink 2 mouthfuls, probably not the cleanest, but you're past caring. One of the other street lads, skinny, missing a few teeth, always in motion, leans over and says, "Heard they opened a new soup line near St. Giles." He doesn't wait for a reply, just bolts into the crowd like someone lit a fire under him. You file the info away. It might save your life later. For now, you head back to the alleyways. You've got no food, no money, and one rapidly decaying foot. You need a plan. But instead you sit on a crate and try not to fall asleep in the sun. That's when it hits you. Pain. Sudden, sharp, and not from your body. It's the smell. You're near the slaughterhouse and the breeze just shifted again. The stench rolls over you. Blood. Offal. Hair. Singed from pigskin. You gag once, but nothing comes up. There's nothing to come up. The slaughterhouse workers pass you with barely a glance. One of them tosses a chunk of gristle into the gutter. You don't even think, you just slide off the crate and grab it before the rats do. You gnaw on it slowly, like it's a fine cut of beef and not a leftover they wouldn't feed a dog. You chew around the bone and tuck what's left into your pocket. Waste not. By early afternoon the cramps start. Hunger cramps, or maybe are from the spoiled gristle. Either way, you double over in a doorway and stay there until the pain fades to something tolerable. A constable walks past and doesn't stop. You don't know if you should feel relieved or insulted. There's no plan now, just motion. You keep walking. West. Maybe someone will drop a coin, maybe a cart will tip, maybe you'll find a handkerchief that no one's claimed. You've done it before. A scarf you once found under a park bench bought you a meal and a dry place to sleep. You're always one forgotten item away from salvation, or starvation. As evening creeps in, your foot screams with every step. You duck into another alley, looking for anywhere you can sit without getting soaked. A boy passes, barefoot, his feet bleeding. He gives you a look of tired recognition, like he sees himself in you. Maybe he does. You nod. He nods. Then he's gone. Historical fact. Public sanitation in Victorian London was so poor that public urinals, often called pissoirs, were crucial shelter for many homeless individuals. Quirky fringe fact, some desperate folks learned to sleep upright inside urinals, using walking sticks or belts to prop themselves against the wall. Open scholarly debate, there's disagreement about whether public sanitation reforms actually helped the poor, or just made them less visible in respectable areas of the city. By late afternoon, the city's air feels thicker, heavier, like someone draped a wet wool blanket over everything. Your foot is a constant throb, but you keep moving because stopping means sinking. Today's survival plan has been downgraded from find food to find warmth, and you know exactly where to look, the factory streets. Not because they're welcoming, God no, but because factories mean heat, even if it's just a chimney's breath spilling into the alleyways. You limp your way to the industrial quarter, past row after row of low brick buildings with tall stacks pumping black smoke into an already grey sky. The smell here is different from Whitechapel's rot or Covent Garden's refuse. This is the smell of work. Coal dust, steam, oil, hot iron and sweat. You can almost taste metal on your tongue. You pass a group of women spilling out of a textile mill, their faces pale with lint dust, coughing quietly as they wrap shawls around themselves. A few glance at you, not with disgust but with a dull recognition. They're one paycheck away from your crate. The noise is relentless. Machines pounding like drums of war, gears clanking, whistles shrieking at shift changes. Even on the street, the vibrations travel up through the stones into your feet. It's like the city's heartbeat, if the city were alive and angry. You find a spot near one of the steam vents, the kind that snakes out from the basement kitchens and boiler rooms. It's not exactly safe. Sometimes they belch out scalding water, but it's warmer than the wind. You press your back to the brick wall and let the faint heat seep through your tattered coat. It's like standing near a sickly sun. You close your eyes and imagine it's a fireplace. You imagine there's tea on the stove. You imagine 100 impossible things because imagining's the only luxury you've got left. A factory boy, no older than 13, comes out carrying a bucket of slag. He dumps it into the gutter and notices you. "Don't lean too close," he mutters. Sometimes it spits. His voice is flat but not unkind. You nod, and he disappears back inside, the door closing behind him with a metallic clang. You shift your weight, trying to take pressure off your bad foot. The pain has settled into a steady burn now, the kind that makes you lightheaded. You know you should take the boot off again, but the idea of exposing your foot in the grime here feels worse. So you leave it, hoping the warmth will help. It won't. You know it won't. As you stand there, a memory surfaces. One of your first factory jobs. You were 11, sweeping floors in a match factory for a few pence a week. The air was full of phosphorus dust, which glowed faintly at night like ghost fire. You thought it was magical until you saw a girl lose half her jaw to phossy jaw, the bone rotting from the inside out. She didn't come back the next day, or any day after. You shake the memory off. It doesn't help to dwell. Factories chew people up and spit them out. Always have, always met. You're lucky you're not inside one right now, even if standing outside it feels like loitering at the gates of hell. By dusk, the skies turned a bruised purple. You're still at the vent, still soaking up the meagre warmth, when a man sidles up next to you. He's older, wearing a coat that's mostly holes. His hands are black with soot. You look half dead, he says conversationally. Ever thought about working nights? You almost laugh. Doing what? Anything, he shrugs. Carrying coal, hauling waste, shoveling slag. They'll pay in bread sometimes. Maybe a coin. Not much, but better than this. You think about it. You've done worse, but your foot throbs. A reminder that even if the job's there, your body isn't ready for it. You shake your head. Not tonight. He shrugs again and walks off, leaving you in the vent's weak warmth. The offer lingers, though. Work means food. Work means a place to stand that isn't the street. Work also means injury, disease, collapse. It's a gamble you're too tired to take. The factory whistle blows for the last shift change. Workers pour out into the street, their faces smudged, eyes dull. They head home to rooms that may be small, crowded, and cold, but still count as homes. You watch them and think of how thin the line is between them and you. A bad cough, a lost finger, a missing day's wages. That's all it takes. The vent cools as the boilers shut down. You lose your one source of heat. You step away reluctantly, pulling your coat tighter. The air feels colder now, like it's punishing you for thinking you'd earned a reprieve. You limp toward the edge of the quarter, passing a row of warehouses. One's burned out, its windows gaping like broken teeth. Another still buzzes with life, carts unloading sacks of grain. You catch a whiff of it. Wheat. Real wheat. And your stomach knots. You imagine grabbing a handful, but you know better. The men guarding it carry sticks, and sticks don't stay sticks long. As the night deepens, the fog thickens, curling low around your ankles. Your foot drags. Your hands are stiff. You need to find shelter again. The crate might still be there. Or maybe you'll try the stairwell near the pump. Anywhere but the rope room tonight. You can't hang from a cord again, not 2 nights in a row. You stop at a street corner, lean against the lamppost, and catch your breath. Across the street, a pub spills light and laughter onto the pavement. Men stumble out red-faced, shouting about the day's work, arms slung over each other's shoulders. One tosses a half-smoked cigarette into the gutter. You grab it before it hits the water. It's still warm. You don't smoke, but you hold it anyway. Warmth is warmth. Historical fact. Industrial London's factories and mills often operated 12 to 16-hour shifts, with many children employed as sweepers and feeders for dangerous machines. Quirky fringe fact, some desperate vagrants pressed their hands to hot factory chimneys at night just to warm their fingers, risking burns for a moment of relief. Open scholarly debate. Historians disagree whether Victorian industry offered the poor a way out of destitution or simply turned them into disposable labour with no safety net. You toss the cigarette when it goes cold and start walking again, even though every step grinds like grit between bone. Hunger's back, sharper now, angry about being ignored, wraps around your gut and pulls tight. There's a stale sort of nausea that comes with being empty too long, a dizziness that makes your legs feel like hollow sticks. You stop beneath a flickering lamp and lean against the post until the world straightens itself. You have one plan, and it's the one you always hate the most: crime for breakfast. You tell yourself it's not real crime, not proper crime. You're not robbing anyone at knife point. You don't even have a knife, but theft is theft, and today, you're going to have to steal something. You've done it before, everyone you know has. Usually something small, a bit of fruit, a loaf left too close to the stall's edge, a forgotten scarf. But today, you aim for something easier. A handkerchief. Not for your nose, obviously. You don't have the luxury of wiping your face on silk, but pickpocketing handkerchiefs is common work on these streets, and if you're lucky, you can sell one to a fence for a few pennies. Just enough for a hot meal, maybe even a cup of tea if you stretch it. You drift toward the West End, where the men wear waistcoats and walk like the pavement belongs to them. They're always talking too loudly or not paying attention at all. Perfect targets. You tuck your hands into your sleeves, eyes down, heart thudding, slow and steady. You pick a mark. A middle-aged heavy coat, silver-topped cane, clearly rich enough to never notice what's missing. You trail behind him for a minute, then close the gap. Your fingers move with a practiced ease, not too fast, not too cautious. A single flick and the white linen is in your hand. You don't look at it. Just slide it into your coat and peel away from him like you were never there. He doesn't notice. You breathe, not relief exactly, just the absence of panic. Now you need to get rid of it. Fast. Carrying stolen goods makes you twitchy. You head to a spot near Seven Dials where you have to know a man who deals in lost things, Mr. Pell. No one knows if that's his real name. He has a beard like a bird's nest and eyes that never blink. He buys fast and sells faster. You find him hunched under a staircase behind a pawn shop, surrounded by crates of broken brass and lace. You hold out the handkerchief. He snatches it from your hand and inspects it with absurd thoroughness, rubbing it between his fingers like a man appraising silk in a palace. Clean, he says, sniffing it. No monogram. Shame. He rubs his chin, then nods. Tuppence. You nod back. It's not a good price, but it's not a bad one either. He drops the coins into your hand, and just like that, it's done. 2 pence. It rattles in your palm. You thank him, out of habit, not sincerity, and walk away before he can ask if you've got anything else. You don't. Now comes the good part. The meal. You head to a pie stall you know near Drury Lane. The woman there's got a face like boiled ham and arms like an ox. She sells hot meat pies for 2p each. Mystery meat, yes, but real crust and warm fat. You approach, hand out the coins, and within seconds she's slapped a wrapped pie into your hand. Don't eat it here, she barks. Go make the air stink somewhere else. You don't argue. You limp away, turn the corner, and find a quiet alcove between 2 shops. You tear into the pie while it's still steaming, the crust flaking under your fingers, the filling salty and suspicious. You don't ask what kind of meat. Could be rat, could be pigeon, could be regret. You eat it in 5 bites and lick your fingers after. The warmth hits your stomach like fire. For a moment, just one, you feel almost full. Not truly, but close enough to remember what the word used to mean. Then the guilt sets in. You stole that pie, not directly, but close enough. And the thought loops in your head like a song. What if that man needed that handkerchief? What if he notices? What if he reports it? What if someone saw? You sit there for a while, the pie wrapper crumpled in your lap, trying to silence the noise inside you. Everyone does it. You had to. The city doesn't feed you otherwise. But the guilt doesn't care about logic. It digs in just like the hunger did. You decide to move. Sitting too long makes you think too much. You head toward the markets, not to steal again, at least not today, but just to be near the chaos. The clatter of barrows, the shouts of sellers, the stink of fish and onions and hot grease. It all fills your brain enough to drown out the voice asking what kind of person you've become. You pass a blind beggar playing a concertina, a battered tin cup at his feet. A little girl drops a penny in. You think about your own coin, spent on stolen pie, and feel something in your gut twist. A constable strolls past. Eyeing the crowd, you freeze for a second, heart climbing your throat, but he doesn't even glance your way. You're just another face in the tide. That's the goal. That's the trick. Be invisible. Be unremarkable. The moment someone remembers your face is the moment you end up in a cell or worse. You make your way toward the river again, not because you need to mudlark, but because you just need space. You sit on the edge, feet dangling over the dark water. The sky's clouded, and the wind smells like coal and distance. You think about the man whose handkerchief you took. You wonder what he's doing now, drinking tea, reading the paper, scratching his nose and wondering where his linen went. You close your eyes and promise you won't steal tomorrow. But you know it's a lie. Historical fact. Pickpocketing in Victorian London was rampant, often carried out by children and teens who were part of informal gangs known as light-fingered folk. Quirky fringe fact. Some street thieves trained themselves using dangling pockets sewn into their own coats, practicing the perfect snatch for hours each day. Open scholarly debate. While pickpocketing was criminalised harshly, scholars debate whether it was more a symptom of structural poverty than genuine moral failure. By now the sun's dipped low enough that the shadows start to stretch long and strange across the cobbles, like the city itself is getting ready to lie down for the night. But you can't. You never do. You sit for a while longer by the river, letting the chill soak into your bones because, somehow, that's less unbearable than the constant ache in your foot. The pie sits warm but restless in your belly. Your body's unsure what to do with real food. It's suspicious, like it's waiting for the trick. So are you. You stand, slower than usual, foot protesting, and begin limping east towards Spitalfields. You know the area, know the corners where pickpockets melt into the smoke, and the places where people vanish with no fuss and even less follow-up. But you're not heading there to vanish. You're going to play a part, a new role, one you've used a handful of times before when things were particularly desperate. The beggar's trick. But not as yourself. You pass through Petticoat Lane, weaving past stalls closing for the day, and duck into an alley. You open your coat and pull out a crumpled bit of cloth, a bonnet. It's grimy, the lace yellowed and fraying, but it still holds shape. You tuck your hair under it, twist your scarf around your neck to hide your jaw, and slump your posture into something delicate. Not pitiful. No, that won't do. You're not trying to be disgusting, you're trying to be sympathetic. Then comes the limp. Not your real one. You soften your stride, let your bad foot drag just a bit more dramatically. You lean on your hip, tilt your head. You become something else. Someone broken but polite. A poor girl, too proud to beg with her mouth, but not too proud to let her eyes do the asking. The transformation isn't perfect, but it doesn't need to be. You're not trying to win an award, just a coin, maybe two. You take up a position near the corner where Bishopsgate meets Brushfield Street, just outside a shop that sells cheap hats to people who want to look like they belong somewhere better. You sit on the edge of the pavement, hands folded in your lap, face tilted toward the light. You blink slow like you're tired. You are, but that's beside the point. You try to look like someone who needs help but doesn't dare ask for it. The passers-by start slow. The first dozen don't even glance. That's normal. Londoners don't look down unless something's bleeding. Then, a woman in a stiff corset and fur collar walks past and hesitates. She fishes in her bag, drops a farthing in your lap and walks on without a word. You don't say thank you. That's part of the trick. Too much gratitude makes them feel awkward. The right amount of quiet humility keeps them reaching for their purses. The farthing's barely worth the metal it's pressed from, but it's a start. Another man passes, well-dressed and loud, laughing with a friend about the races. He glances at you, and for a second you see it. His hesitation, the war in his head between conscience and convenience. Then he shrugs and tosses a coin. Tuppence. It lands near your foot. You wait until he's gone before you scoop it up. That's 3 1/4 now. Enough for bread, enough for a leaner seat. You stay put. The light fades, the gas lamps flicker on. The shop closes behind you, but you don't move. You're part of the scenery now. Another poor figure wrapped in rags, draped over the edge of civility. Eventually, a constable comes by. He doesn't say anything at first, just stands nearby watching. Then he clears his throat and steps forward. "All right, love. You've had your hour. Off you go now." You look up at him, blinking like a confused doe. He frowns, unsure. "Go on," he says, a bit softer. "No rough sleeping on the shops. You know that." You nod, gather your things and stand, slow, trembling, slightly. You don't speak. That's part of the game. He watches you go, probably thinking he's just done a good deed. Moved along a harmless wretch. You limp around the corner and disappear into the next alley, ducking behind crates. There, under the cover of darkened brick, you sit down again and pull off the bonnet. Your real limp returns, heavier now that you've pushed it too far. You shake out your hair and rub your eyes. You count the coins, 3 1/4, better than some nights. But here's the thing, this game doesn't always work. You've seen what happens when someone pushes it too far, when sympathy dries up. You remember Rosie, the girl who used to wear a black veil and pretend she was grieving a lost child. She got too good at it. Someone noticed her doing the same act 3 nights in a row, different corners, same tears left downstairs. A constable dragged her off. No one's seen her since. It's a dangerous role, begging in disguise. The city's patience is thin, and the difference between poor girl and con artist is of about 1 wrong word and 1 angry gentleman who doesn't like being tricked. You rest for a moment, pressing your foot to ease the swelling, then tuck the bonnet back into your coat. It'll be useful again. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe next week, but you'll need it again. The thought creeps in, how much longer can you do this? How many more times can you bend yourself into a shape that strangers will pity? You hear a cat fight break out nearby, shrieks echoing down the alley. You flinch. One of them yowls, then goes silent. A door slams somewhere. Footsteps echo and fade. You rise slowly and limp away from the alley, back into the noise and gaslight. You've got your coins. That's all that matters. Your stomach still aches, your foot is worse, and the city doesn't care about your moral dilemmas. But for tonight, you ate, you earned, you acted, you survived. Historical fact? Victorian women often resorted to disguises or roleplay to beg successfully, especially widows or mothers, real or fabricated, seeking sympathy from passing strangers. Quirky fringe fact, some beggars rented babies to appear more pitiable, paying a small fee to hold a sleeping child while they panhandled. Open scholarly debate. Scholars debate whether these performances were purely exploitative or strategic resistance, weaponizing pity in a system that offered no other options. You feel it in the air before you see it. Christmas. It's not the lights or the carolers that give it away, though they're everywhere. Piping out cheer from street corners like cracked music boxes. No, it's the cold. A deeper cold. Not just wind and mist, but a kind that finds its way beneath your clothes, beneath your skin, straight to your bones. You can tell it's close to Christmas because the cold has turned from uncomfortable to cruel. The kind that takes fingers, then feet, then names. You don't even need to ask what day it is. The ice on the inside of the windows tells you all you need to know. You wake in a stairwell near Marylebone, not your usual spot, but it was dry, and the door was stuck half open, so you took your chances. Someone had left a coal scuttle near the entrance, still faintly warm. You curled up beside it like a cat. No one came to move you. Maybe they were out for the holiday. Maybe they looked and thought you were part of the furniture. You pull yourself upright now, slowly, like your joints have been rusted shut overnight. You step into the street, and that's when it hits you in full, the sounds of cheer. Bells clanging out of churches, carolers Yehoah singing, God rest ye merry, like anyone's merry today. Children squealing at the sight of shop windows stuffed with oranges and peppermint sticks. It would almost be beautiful if it didn't feel like a lie. Because for you and for everyone else sleeping rough, Christmas is just another day to be hungry, another night to survive, dressed in the glow of other people's joy. The city looks different today. Cleaned up, polished. Even the beggars have been moved from the nicer districts, gently urged, shoved, or simply threatened away, so the rich can enjoy their walks without the burden of conscience. You see wreaths on the gas lamps, garlands strung across shop fronts, candles burning in windows like they're welcoming ghosts. There's roasted chestnut smoke in the air, and it makes your stomach lurch with longing. You pass a bakery and pause. Inside, people bustle about with baskets and gloves, buying mince pies and treacle tarts, their cheeks red from the cold, their laughter muffled by scarf-wrapped faces. You watch a boy take a bite of something warm, the steam curling from the crust. He doesn't finish it, drops the last third on the ground. You wait until he rounds the corner, then walk over, snatch it up and shove it into your mouth like a thief. It's sweet. Still warm, you don't care about the dirt. Dirt doesn't kill you, hunger does. You drift toward the churches. They're handing out food today, some of them, anyway. If you get lucky, you'll catch one that isn't packed, one that hasn't run out of broth or decided to prioritise the deserving poor. That phrase always makes your teeth clench. As if being poor isn't bad enough, you also have to be worthy of help. Like this is a prize and not survival. The first church you try has a queue stretching around the block, mostly women and children. You limp past, no point. By the time you'd reach the door, they'd be down to hot water and pity. The second church has closed its doors altogether. You knock once, no answer. The third, an old stone building with stained glass windows glowing from within, looks promising. You step inside and are immediately hit with the scent of meat and spice. Your stomach growls so loud it's nearly a confession. You follow the line of ragged people toward the front of the hall where a row of tables offers plates. Actual plates, stacked with slices of bread, meat pies, and something thick and brown that might be gravy. A woman in a plain bonnet hands you a plate without looking at your face. You take it like it's sacred. You find a place near the wall, hunker down and eat with both hands, not even pretending to be polite. The meat's a little tough, the bread's stale around the edges, but it might as well be a banquet. The gravy's real. There's even a slice of orange at the edge of the plate. Christmas generosity, apparently. You haven't had fruit in so long it feels like a joke. Around you, the other diners eat with the same mix of desperation and disbelief. No one talks. There's no need. You're all sharing the same moment, being full, or close enough to pretend. Afterward, you linger outside the church, unsure where to go next. The sky's bruised and heavy, and snow starts falling in dry, powdery flakes that stick to your eyelashes. You sit on a stoop and watch the city blur into white. People walk past you with parcels and packages, some singing, some drunk. A group of boys in uniform toss snowballs at each other, laughing like life's never touched them. You wonder, for a moment, what your life would have been if things had gone differently. If your father had kept his job. If your mother hadn't taken sick. If your uncle hadn't died in the workhouse. You wonder if there was ever a version of this day where you sat at a table with candles and turkey, pulling crackers and telling jokes. You picture it, just for a second, then you shake it off. A man stops in front of you. He's tall, well-dressed, with a moustache waxed to fine points. He looks at you like he's not quite sure you're real. Then he drops a coin into your lap. A whole shilling. You stare at it stunned. "Merry Christmas," he says, and walks away before you can speak. You hold the coin like it's a flame. You could buy a hot meal. You could pay for a bunk. You could briefly live like someone who isn't drowning. The coin stays warm in your palm for a long time. Eventually, you tuck it deep into your pocket and stand. The snow's falling faster now. The city's softened around the edges. As if even London is trying to forgive itself for what it's done to you. You start walking, no plan, just forward. Tonight you'll find a place, and tomorrow you'll start again. Historical fact. In Victorian London, charitable churches and missions often offered free Christmas meals to the poor, though limited space meant many were turned away. Quirky fringe fact, some Victorian children believed eating an orange on Christmas meant you'd have good luck all year, if you didn't peel it in more than 7 pieces. Open scholarly debate. Some historians question how much Christmas charity actually changed the lives of the poor or merely soothed the conscience of the wealthy for a single day. You carry the shilling in your pocket like it's made of glass, afraid to look at it too much, afraid to lose it, afraid of what it means to have something valuable in a life where everything gets taken. It feels too heavy to be real, too bright. You keep checking to make sure it's still there, pressing your fingers against the worn edge of the coin like it might vanish if you don't remind it you exist. You could go to a lodging house, a real one, not a rope, not a leaner's bench, a proper bunk with a mattress, thin as it may be, and, if luck holds, a blanket that hasn't been pissed on. But before you do that, before you spend your windfall, something draws you away from the main streets. Something strange and stupid. Curiosity. You've heard the talk, drifting through the alleys and soup lines. A new body found. Woman again. Same pattern. The Ripper. Or a copycat. Or a madman with a knife and a map. No one knows. No one wants to know. Not really. But still, people go. And they say the body's still out in a mortuary open to the public. They say the police are letting people see, for identification supposedly, for justice. But the truth is, people want to look. Want to get close to the edge of horror and go home feeling lucky they aren't her. You walk east, past pubs too rowdy for their own good, and houses with broken windows patched in newspaper. The snow has thinned but left behind a slick grey slush. Your foot protests with every step. But the coin in your pocket presses you forward. Like a weight. Like a dare. The morgue is in Whitechapel. Of course it is. That's where everything foul and fascinating seems to settle. You find it by the crowd, a line, snaking along the brick wall, people shuffling forward, scarves over mouths, coats buttoned tight. You fall into it without thinking, standing among men with cigars and women with lace gloves holding handkerchiefs to their noses. You wonder how many of them even knew her. How many are just here because the city offered them a little theatre today? The line moves slowly. Inside, the light is low, yellowed gas lamps casting a sick glow over white tiles. The smell is stronger than you expect, sweet and metallic, like spoiled fruit and old pennies. A mortuary attendant stands near the sheet-covered form on the slab, nodding people forward one by one. "Don't touch. Don't linger," he says like a prayer. You step forward. She's laid out like a wax figure, one arm draped awkwardly, face turned just slightly toward the wall. The sheet is pulled low enough to see the wounds. You expected blood, mess, something gruesome. But what shocks you is the stillness, the absolute quiet of her. Whatever she was, wife, mother, thief, friend, she's none of it now. Just a body barely warmed by the lamps, watched by strangers hoping for a shiver of recognition, or a good story to tell over dinner. You don't recognise her, not really, but she looks familiar in that awful way, like every woman you've ever seen, huddled in a stairwell or standing in a soup line trying to pretend she still has a name. You stare for too long. The mortuary man clears his throat. You turn and leave. Outside, the air tastes fresher, but colder. A boy sells papers on the corner shouting, "Another Ripper victim! 3rd this month!" He's got a grin on his face like it's a carnival ride. You think about that woman on the slab, her life reduced to a headline and a body count. You wonder how long it'll be before people forget her name, or if they even knew it to begin with. You walk, fast, away from the crowd, away from the noise. Your breath comes out in clouds. The sky overhead is low and heavy, like it wants to press the whole city flat. You duck into a narrow lane to catch your breath, leaning against the wall, hand in your pocket, still gripping the shilling, still there, still real. You think about spending it now, getting away from all this. But instead, you let your feet carry you, not toward a pub or a market or even a mission, toward the edge of the docks, where the river cuts through the city like a scar. The water is dark and sluggish, moving slow under the weight of winter. A barge creaks in the distance, a gull cries overhead, and that's when you see them. 2 girls, no older than 10, sitting on a wooden crate by the water, their arms wrapped around each other. You recognise the look in their faces, the long stare of people who have run out of options. One of them is barefoot, the other's holding something small and limp in her hands. A kitten maybe, a rag doll, you can't tell, it doesn't matter. They don't see you. You pull the shilling from your pocket and stare at it. You could walk right past. You earned it. You could buy a hot dinner, rent a bunk, even get a pair of clean socks. Instead, you walk up slow and quiet, place the coin on the edge of the crate beside them, and turn away before they look up. You don't need thanks, you don't want it. You walk faster now, not proud, not sad, just lighter. By the time you reach the road again, the snow has started to fall once more. Big wet flakes, soaking through your coat and hair, but the air feels cleaner. Not warm, no, but cleaner. You find shelter under the overhang of a closed butcher's shop. The awning is torn, but it blocks the worst of the snow. You curl up there for the night, coat over your knees, arms tucked in. You dream of silence, of water, of a girl on a slab who finally gets to sleep without fear. Historical fact, a London hospital in Whitechapel often opened its mortuary to the public during the Ripper investigation in hopes of identifying victims. Quirky fringe fact, some Victorians treated the morgue like a macabre tourist attraction, lining up to see bodies with the same eagerness as they'd attend a magic lantern show. Open scholarly debate. Scholars continue to argue whether this public exposure of the dead reflected a failure of dignity or a grim necessity in the face of widespread anonymity among the poor. When you wake, your back is soaked through. The butcher's awning did its best, but somewhere around 3 in the morning the snow turned to rain, and now everything smells like wet meat and sour blood. The puddle you slept in has started to freeze again around the edges, turning your coat into a half-frozen shroud. You sit up, peeling yourself off the stone like a sticker on a damp window, and stretch your arms, your shoulders screaming protest. It's another day in London, and you're still here. The world above you is the same. The city never stops moving, not for death or cold or rain. Carriages roll past in the street, splashing muddy slush into gutters already choked with horse dung and broken glass. The shops are opening. You hear the metallic clatter of shutters rolling up, the bark of a grocer hollering his prices to no one in particular, and the chatter of finely dressed ladies gossiping like it's their religion. You blend back in, unseen, unimportant, but still listening. Something catches your eye as you limp towards a Fleet Street. A newspaper stand. Not for you, not normally. You don't read most of what's printed. Can't. Not with words that dance across the page like they're mocking you. But today the papers are screaming at you in bold ink. Headlines shout about the newest victim, the Ripper, the East End, the horror. Her name's in there, you think. or what they think was her name, probably spelled wrong. And next to the articles are pictures. Sketches, actually. Black and white, dramatic, all shadows and misery. There she is, the dead woman you saw on the slab. But now she's a symbol. Her cheekbones have been sharpened by the artist's pencil, her eyes closed just enough to suggest mystery instead of murder. She doesn't even look like herself. They've made her interesting. You move closer, half curious, half disgusted. A man standing near the stall says, "Terrible business, eh?" And you nod. He doesn't mean it. You can tell. His coat is too clean. His gloves are too new. He's reading about murder like it's entertainment shint, and when he finishes, he'll fold the paper under his arm and buy a pork pie like none of it matters. You keep walking. By the time you reach Covent Garden, the sketch is stuck in your mind. Not the woman, no, not really her, but the way they drew her. Like she belonged to the city, not to herself. You've seen it before. Your own face hasn't made the paper, not yet. But your kind, your shape, your silhouette, appears all the time. In magazines, in leaflets, on posters warning against vagrants, the gutter rat, the criminal poor. You've been a dozen different monsters in print without even getting your own name on the list. A little further on, there's a magazine stand with rows of penny periodicals, the Illustrated Police News, the Penny Satirist, the Illustrated London Life, covers showing bloody knives, helpless women, masked killers, twisted caricatures of men like you with bulging eyes and missing teeth. The stories inside are barely stories, half-truths soaked in melodrama and splattered with moral panic. And yet people eat them up. A woman stops at the stand and buys a copy with a cover showing a gaunt man, crouched in an alley, holding a knife and wearing your face. She pays a halfpenny, laughs at something the seller says, and tucks it into her reticule like it's candy. You wonder if she'll read it on the omnibus, if she'll tell her friends about the terrible state of the streets, while sipping tea and tutting, as though the city's miseries were a play she could exit before the final act. You find a place to sit, an old crate next to a lamppost still wet with melting snow. Your fingers are purple and cracked, and your foot is swollen, stiff and discoloured. You know what that means. You saw it last winter when Eddie, the bootblack boy, lost 2 toes. He cried until he passed out. When he woke up, he just looked at the place where his toes used to be and said, "At least I got a pair left." He died in April. You adjust your boot, not because it helps, but because you need to do something. A man approaches you, clean coat, spectacles, notebook in hand. He crouches to your level with the careful precision of someone who's never knelt on cold stone in his life. "Pardon me, he says. "I'm writing an article on the conditions of London's poor. Might I ask you a few questions?" You stare at him. He smiles like this is a favour. "Just a few details. Your name, how long you've lived rough, what brought you here, that sort of thing." You could tell him. You could pour it all out. Your story, your pain, your stolen food, your frozen foot. You could give him everything. But what's he going to do with it? Print it next to a drawing of you hunched in the gutter, with a headline like "The Desperate Life of a Street Wretch"? Maybe they'll call you tragic, maybe savage, maybe both. So you say nothing. His smile falters. He offers you a farthing. You take it. He thanks you anyway and walks off, scribbling in his notebook like you were just another detail to be filed away. Another line of ink on a page about a life he'll never understand. You sit there a while longer, watching people pass. You're in all their heads, you realise. Not you, exactly, but the idea of you. You're the symbol in their stories. The warning, the villain, the punchline, the tragedy. You've become their metaphor. They draw you because it's easier than fixing the world that made you. You tear off a strip of your coat lining and wrap it around your foot again. It won't help. You do it anyway. When you stand, it takes longer than it should. You move slowly now. Everything hurts. But you're still moving. That's what matters. A man drops a coin at your feet. Accident or pity, you don't know. You don't ask. You pocket it, nod, and walk on. One more shadow in a city full of them. Historical fact: Victorian newspapers often sensationalise crime and poverty, with papers like the Illustrated Police News featuring lurid illustrations of the destitute and criminal underclass. Quirky fringe fact: some artists who sketched the poor for publications were middle-class men who never spoke to their subjects, instead imagining expressions of despair or villainy. Open scholarly debate. Scholars continue to question whether Victorian media shaped public opinion about the poor, or simply reflected the biases of its wealthier readers. You spend the rest of the day drifting through the city like smoke, pulled along by instinct and whatever warmth your body can scavenge. The newspapers have done their work well. You can feel it in the way people look at you today, or rather, the way they don't. Eyes skate past like you're something on the edge of their vision, something better left unacknowledged. They saw your shape on a magazine cover this morning and that's enough. They know who you are now, vagrant, menace, symbol. Whatever charity was floating around on Christmas has dried up by the 27th. The holiday's over. The pity's gone. You're back to being the problem. You haven't eaten today, not properly. A crust here, a crust there. Enough to keep your stomach from turning inside out, but not enough to make it quiet. The coin you picked up earlier bought you a stale roll from a woman near the market. She slapped your hand away when you asked for butter. You said nothing. You always say nothing now. Mid-afternoon finds you in Bloomsbury, near a building you've avoided for months. A charity mission run by reformers. Not your average soup and scripture lot. These ones are organised, clean-shaven, tight-lipped, always writing things down. They talk in terms like uplift and moral recalibration, like poverty is something you can scrub off with enough elbow grease and humility. You stand across the street for a long while watching people go in. Most of them look like you, frayed at the edges, cold, hungry. But they're doing the thing you haven't yet been able to do, crossing the threshold. It feels like walking into a courtroom, or worse, a stage. Because once you're inside, you're no longer a person. You're a project. Still, your foot's getting worse, your head is pounding, and the wind has taken on that razor-sharp edge again. So you cross. Inside, the mission is warm. That's the first thing. You feel it before anything else. The kind of heat that comes from coal stoves and smugness. The room smells of soap, chalk, and boiled vegetables. Not unpleasant, just institutional. You pause at the doorway until someone beckons you forward. A woman in a high collar. Her hair pulled so tight it looks like it hurts. She smiles like she's been trained to do it in a mirror. "Welcome," she says, and already you feel like a sinner. "Have you been here before?" You shake your head. "Wonderful. Come in, please. There's soup, and we have a clean blanket if you stay for the lesson." There it is. The transaction. You sit at a table with a handful of other men and women all looking like they've been pulled straight from the same gutter. A child sits next to you, his nose crusted, his fingers tapping the table in a rhythmic twitch. His mother whispers something to him, then turns away when she sees you looking. The soup is served in white ceramic bowls that clink politely against the table. It's hot, mercifully, and tastes faintly of lentils and pepper. The bread is dense and grey. You eat every bite, not because it's good, but because it's not air. Then the lesson begins. A man in a dark coat stands in front of a blackboard and talks about redemption, about moral failure, about how every man has the power to rise above his station if he just works hard, avoids drink, and fears God appropriately. He gestures with a little stick and writes words like temperance and industry in chalk, each one underlined twice for emphasis. You keep your head down, spooning the last bits of broth from your bowl. You've heard this script before. It never changes. You used to get angry about it, but that takes energy. Now you just sit through it like bad weather. After the talk, the woman who greeted you offers you a blanket, clean and thin but not torn. You take it with a nod and fold it over your arm like it's something valuable, which it is. She gives you a pamphlet too, something about turning your life around. You don't read it. You tuck it into your coat pocket, where it will probably turn to pulp in the next rain. As you move toward the door, she calls after you. "There's work if you want it," she says, "at the hall. Cleaning, sorting donations, we offer a small wage." You pause. "Will I have to come to the talks?" "Yes," she says without flinching. You nod once. "Maybe tomorrow," she smiles again. "God bless you." Out on the street, the cold hits harder now, like it's punishing you for being warm even for a little while. But the blanket helps. You wrap it around your shoulders like a cape and breathe out steam. The sun is slipping behind the rooftops, dragging the fog with it. You head east again, toward the back alleys where nobody asks what you believe, only how you smell and whether you've got anything worth stealing. You think about the work they offered. Cleaning, sorting, not terrible, not digging ditches or shoveling ash, but the idea of sitting through more lectures, more finger waggings, more gentle corrections from people who think soup is a soul-cleansing agent. It makes your skin itch. Still a wedge. Even a small one. You haven't held coins in your hand that you earned in weeks. Real work, real pay. The thought lingers. That night you sleep in the old stairwell near Aldgate. The same one you found by accident a few weeks ago. It's dry if you wedge yourself near the banister. You fold the blanket tightly around your body and sit upright. The pain in your foot is a steady drumbeat now. You don't look at it. You don't need to. You do something strange though, something you haven't done in a long time. You pray, not for salvation or miracles or a clean bed, just for a job that doesn't hurt, a warm bowl of soup without a sermon, and a night where you can sleep the whole way through without dreaming of fire or frost. You whisper it into the dark where nobody's listening. Still, it feels better to say it. Historical fact, Victorian reform missions often tied aid to religious education and moral rehabilitation, offering food and temporary work only to those willing to submit to lectures and worship. Quirky fringe fact. Some missions issued tokens to the poor which could be exchanged for soup or lodging, but only if the recipient sat through a full sermon. Open scholarly debate? Historians debate whether these reformers genuinely helped the poor, or simply sought to mould them into a middle-class ideal through control disguised as charity. The next morning, your stomach wakes up before you do. It twists and rolls like it's trying to eat itself, reminding you that soup bought with a sermon is still just soup, and it doesn't last long. You open your eyes to grey light leaking in from above the stairwell. The city is already stretching and growling to life, wheels clattering over cobbles, hawkers calling out bread prices with voices like sandpaper. Your foot has stiffened again overnight, so every attempt to move feels like punishment. You shift slowly, carefully, trying not to tear the skin that's already threatening to split. You unfold your blanket, still mostly dry, a small miracle, and stuff it under your coat before someone decides they need it more. Then you rise and limp your way back into the city. You think about the mission, about the job, cleaning and sorting, probably more lectures, more praying for your sins with people who've never scraped dirt from the cracks in their lips just to feel clean. You're not sure if it's worth the energy. But a part of you is curious. A part of you wants to remember what it felt like to earn something. Not steal, not beg, earn. But before you decide, you find yourself in another alley. One you haven't been to in a while, and you see him again. Old Gib, they call him. Not because that's his name, but because he's the one who trades in gibberish and bones. He's crouched beside a heap of rags, separating metal scraps with a pair of cracked gloves. His coat looks like it was stitched together by a blind man using hope and threadbare dreams. Around him are sacks, rags, bottles, bones, nails, anything someone might buy for a halfpenny. He glances up and grins, his mouth full of yellow stumps. "Well, if it ain't the limper," he says. "You're still above ground. Good on you." You nod. Still trying. Gib gestures to the pile beside him. "You want in? I'll split what we get if you help me haul to the yard. Rag and Bone Man pays fair if you don't mind smelling like the inside of a dead dog for an hour." It's not tempting. Not even a little. But your gut growls again, and your foot, though angry, hasn't stopped you yet. So you nod and drop to your knees beside the pile. You work together for nearly an hour, sorting through refuse with a precision that comes from desperation. You learn to identify value by touch. Bones that aren't too brittle, rags that still have some colour, bottles with necks intact. Everything is worth something to someone. You just have to know who. At one point you find a jawbone, human. You freeze for a second, and old Gib just cackles. "City spits up its ghosts, don't it?" he says. "Keep it or chuck it. I don't mind." You don't ask where it came from. You bury it deeper in the trash and keep going. When the pile is sorted, you help carry the sacks to the rag yard, down a twisting path behind a tannery where the air smells like boiled hooves and failure. The yard is a mess of carts, barrels, and men yelling prices at each other like it's a market of misery. You and Gib unload your sacks. A man with half an ear and a brass scale sorts through your collection. After some grunting and haggling, he hands Gib a handful of coins. Gib spits in his palm and counts them. Then he tosses you a tuppence. "Fair cut," he says. You nod. It is, more than some would give. You slide the coins into your pocket and feel that strange lightness again. That old flicker of pride. 2 pence you earned, even if it came from muck and bones. Gib offers you a swig from a bottle of something that smells like turpentine and dead apples. You shake your head, not because you're above it, Lord knows you're not, but because the thought of drinking right now feels like giving up. You leave the yard with the coins clinking softly in your pocket, like a lullaby sung by Rust. You think about spending them on bread, or maybe soap, or maybe a tin of grease for your foot if you can find someone selling odds and ends, but instead you go back to the mission. The same woman is there. Her smile is just as tight. She doesn't ask why you came back. She just nods and hands you a broom. You sweep. For hours. Long hallways, dusty corners, places no one notices until they become a problem. You sweep like you're trying to carve a path back to yourself. You don't complain. You don't speak much. You just work. At the end of the shift, they will hand you a loaf of bread and 4p. The bread is warm. You hold it in your hands like it's the crown jewels. You say thank you, and for once you mean it. They offer you a place to sleep too. Not much, just a cot in a shared room with 10 others. But it's dry. It's not the rope. And tonight, it's yours. You lie on the cot and stare at the ceiling. The room smells like soap and sweat and something faintly floral. Probably a powder shaken over the mattresses to hide the stink. Your foot throbs, but the rest of you is still. You don't sleep well, not yet, but you do sleep. And when you wake, you remember something you thought you'd lost. The feeling of earning your sleep, not surviving it. Historical fact, rag and bone men were common in the Victorian London. Collecting and reselling discarded items like cloth, bones and scrap metal, often employing the homeless as day labourers. Quirky fringe fact, bones collected by the rag pickers were used in everything from soap to bone china to fertiliser, creating an entire industry built on urban decay. Open scholarly debate? Some historians view informal economies like rag picking as empowering survival strategies, while others argue they prolonged poverty by entrenching people in dangerous and unsanitary work. You don't stay long at the mission, 3 nights, maybe 4, long enough for your foot to shrink down to a dull throb instead of a pulsing monster, long enough to stop coughing up soot every morning. They fed you soup twice a day, thin but warm, and handed out work with a practiced rhythm, sweeping, polishing, folding clothes that would be given to people slightly cleaner than you. You even spoke once to the boy who swept the floor beside you, a skinny lad with ears too big for his face and a laugh like a bird startled from a bush. His name was Jonah. His shoes didn't match. You liked him. But there's something about charity that starts to itch after a while. The clean walls, the prayers before bread, the way they look at you, like you're always teetering on the edge of their approval. One wrong word and the soup dries up. One bad cough and you're marked ill, and then you're back on the curb. It's not a place to live, it's a holding pen. So you leave. It's not dramatic. You just don't go back the next night. You've got the cot coins in your pocket and a crust of bread wrapped in an old handkerchief. You step back into the city like you never left it, and it barely notices. The sky's grey, the gutters are clogged, and London smells like it always does. Smoke and iron and secrets. You drift east toward Shoreditch, drawn not by comfort but by something heavier. A need, a want, maybe even loneliness, though you wouldn't say it out loud. You're looking for someone, or something, or maybe just not to be alone anymore. You find it in a courtyard between 2 buildings that lean like drunks into each other. It's not even a real square, just a clearing where a fire burns in a broken barrel and a few bodies warm their hands. They eye you as you approach, not hostile, just cautious. You nod. They nod. That's the contract. You sit. One of them, a woman with a face as sharp as a trowel, offers you a chunk of potato from her tin. You take it. It's cold and tough and glorious, she grunts. You grunt. Another body joins you at the fire. Tall, wiry, teeth too white to be real. He's got a dog with him, all ribs and attitude. The dog growls once, then flops down beside him like it's already forgotten you. The woman leans back and says, "You staying?" "Maybe," she shrugs. "Long as you don't snore." The fire spits sparks into the air. Someone starts humming. You let yourself settle into it to this strange warmth that has nothing to do with flame. Over the next few days, this courtyard becomes a kind of home. Not safe exactly, but steady. People come and go, some trade, buttons for bread, cloth for matches, jokes for half a tin of tobacco. You learn their names, or what they call themselves. Brick, Nell, Soot, names like armour. Everyone here's come from somewhere and is going nowhere. And that makes them kind in the quietest, saddest way. You sleep close to the fire barrel, wrapped in your blanket, coat pulled over your knees. The cold still bites, but it doesn't sink as deep. You eat what you can trade for. You even laugh once. Brick tells a story about stealing boots off a sleeping constable and getting chased barefoot through 3 boroughs. You know he's lying, but you let him have it. That's the kind of currency that spends well out here. And then there's love. Not the real kind. Not the type with flowers and letters and bedsheets that don't smell like mildew, but the kind that shows up at 3 in the morning when someone's shaking from fever and you press your body next to theirs for heat. The kind that comes when you share the last bit of bread, without even asking for half back. One night, you find yourself curled next to someone you didn't expect. Nell, she doesn't say anything. She just slides closer, wraps her arms around your ribs and sighs into your shoulder. You stay like that until the fire dies down and the city starts to breathe again. It's not about sex, it's not about safety. It's just the simple, staggering miracle of warmth. You talk sometimes, in that weird, sideways way homeless people do, never directly, never asking too much. You learn that Nell was a seamstress once, worked for a dressmaker in Soho, got sick, missed a few days, lost her job, and then the rent swallowed her whole. She tried to go back. They told her she looked wrong. Wrong how, you asked? Like I'd started to rot, she said and chuckled. You tell her about your foot, about the rope room, about the mission. You leave out the rest. You always leave out the rest. In this circle of fire and filth, everything is fleeting. But it's real. Real in a way that the sermons and soup lines and penny lodgings never were. Here, no one's pretending. No one's judging. You're all just floating in the same tide, trying not to sink too deep. Sometimes, in the early hours, you think about staying here forever, about carving a place into the cracks of this city so and calling it your own. But you know better. The city doesn't let anything stay. Not grief, not love, not even names. It just moves on. So you do too. Historical fact, homeless communities in Victorian London often formed informal encampments, gathering around fire barrels in abandoned lots or between buildings for warmth and mutual aid. Quirky fringe fact. Some street dogs were so familiar in these areas that locals gave them names and considered them members of their courtyard families. Open scholarly debate. Historians debate whether these micro-communities functioned as forms of resistance and solidarity, or if they merely prolonged suffering by isolating the poor from formal aid systems. You leave the courtyard before dawn, not because of anything said, not because the fire burned out or the others turned on you, nothing so dramatic. Just a feeling, a quiet shift inside you, like you've soaked up all the warmth you're allowed and now the city's ready to take it back. Nell's still sleeping when you go, her hands curled around the neck of the stray dog, her cheeks smudged with ash. You almost say goodbye, but the word sticks in your throat. What would be the point? This isn't a place for long goodbyes, you just walk away. The streets are nearly silent, just the occasional milk cart rattling past, a few birds pecking at crumbs near a shuttered cafe. Fog presses down low, smothering the buildings in a thick yellow-grey film. You limp slowly, not even sure where you're going, your foot now wrapped in what used to be the sleeve of your coat. It's raw and puffy, but still attached. A win, by street standards. You turn onto a side road and nearly walk into a man with a white coat and a satchel. A doctor, you guess, though he's not wearing the kind of hat that says I bill rich people by the hour. No, this one's from a clinic, probably. He stops, eyes you, and says, "Christ," under his breath. Then he steps closer, gently, like you might bolt. "You're limping bad," he says. "Foot infected?" You hesitate, then nod. He glances up the street, then back to you. "We're setting up clinic hours around the corner. Free care, nothing fancy, no sermons. Come now or don't come at all." You follow him because you don't have any better ideas. He leads you through a narrow alley that smells of cabbage and coal, then into a tiny brick building barely the width of a train car. Inside it's bright and clean, jarringly so. Whitewashed walls, rough wooden benches, and a handful of other patients. A woman with a hacking cough, a man holding his arm at a strange angle, a boy clutching a swollen jaw. You sit, and the doctor nods to one of the assistants. "Get me water. Clean rags. Bring the tincture." The foot examination isn't gentle, but it's faster than you expect. He unwinds the makeshift wrapping, winces at what he sees, and begins scrubbing. You bite your sleeve to keep from shouting. He pours something that feels like fire straight into the wound. "You should have come days ago," he mutters. "You're lucky you still have it." "I'm not sure lucky means what you think it does." You rasp, voice hoarse. He chuckles just once. You'd be surprised. "We've had worse." You glance around the room. It's small, yes, but it hums with a kind of energy you haven't felt in a long time. People helping because they can, not because they're trying to save your soul or write a paper about it. No lectures, no prayers, no coins changing hands, just medicine, just help. After he wraps your foot in real bandages and hands you a crust of bread and a tin cup of broth, he says, "We could use someone like you." You blink. "Like me?" He nods toward a stack of boxes. Unloading supplies, cleaning basins, helping folks in the queue. You don't need a degree, just 2 arms and a pulse. You stare at him, unsure what to say. "Think about it," he adds. "Most folks just vanish. We remember the ones who stay." You nod. Not because you've decided anything, but because it's easier than explaining that your life moves like smoke through cracks, that staying anywhere feels like daring the wind to blow you out. You leave the clinic with your foot bandaged, your belly barely warmed, and a strange buzzing feeling in your chest. You can't name it. It might be hope. It might be leftover pain. You spend the day drifting, watching. A dead cart rolls past near Spitalfields, the kind they send for the poor who die in stairwells or alleys. 2 men heave a body onto the back and cover it with a tarp. You recognise the boots sticking out. They belong to a man who used to sleep near the bakery's vent. You never learned his name. You didn't need to. You'd shared a stolen apple once. That was enough. Later, near St. Luke's, you find a boy selling medicine from a cracked wooden tray. "Cures for cough, gout, boils and female troubles," he shouts, waving tiny bottles with labels so smudged they might have been written in fog. You shake your head, but he grins anyway and says, "You don't look too bad today," so it takes you a second to realise it's Jonah from the mission. His ears still stick out. His smile hasn't dulled. You share your bread with him. He gives you a bottle of elixir that smells like old socks and vinegar. "No charge," he says. "Just for company." You wonder if this is what passes for friendship now, sharing fake medicine and real bread on a stoop near a tavern, too broke for gaslight. You find a place to sleep that night beneath an overhang near Smithfield Market. You wedge yourself between 2 crates, blanket wrapped tight, coat stuffed behind your back like a cushion. Your foot aches but doesn't burn. That feels like progress. Above you, the city creaks and mutters like an old man in his sleep. Somewhere nearby, a cat yowls, a drunk sings something off-key, and a horse's hooves clip past like distant thunder. You don't dream, not really, but you think in the dark about the clinic, about the doctor, about the people who stay, maybe tomorrow. Historical fact, free clinics for the poor began emerging in Victorian London by the late 1800s, offering minimal but crucial care for those turned away by hospitals. Quirky fringe fact, some clinics posted signs reading "No questions asked" to reassure the destitute and avoid scaring off those with criminal records or contagious conditions. Open scholarly debate. There's ongoing discussion about whether early free clinics were acts of progressive healthcare, or ways to monitor and manage the urban poor more effectively. You wake before the sun. It's not intentional. You don't set alarms when your bed's a crate and your ceiling's an awning, but your body's got its own way of keeping time now. You know the hour by the silence. The city hasn't yawned open yet. No market carts rumbling, no shouting bakers, no bells, just the low hum of a city holding its breath. You sit up slowly, checking your foot first. Still there, still wrapped. Still sore, but not angry, that's something. The braid you wrapped last night has gone a bit stale, but it's food. You tear it in half, tuck one piece away for later, and eat the rest with your eyes on the waking skyline. London's got a way of looking beautiful when nobody's watching, when the gas lamps are still flickering and the fog hasn't been scraped off the rooftops yet. You feel like you've caught the city off guard. Vulnerable. Honest. You almost smile, then you remember what day it is. You don't know the number, but you feel it. Time to move again. You've been lucky lately. Mission meals, courtyard warmth, a clinic visit that didn't end with an amputation, but you can't push your luck too far. The city notices. You can only be invisible so long before someone decides you're in the way again. But today feels different. Not lighter. Exactly, just more possible. You walk slowly through the market, dodging puddles and ducking under wooden awnings where early vendors are setting up. You eye a cart piled with apples, bruised but edible. The vendor doesn't look your way. You don't take one. You could, but you don't. Instead, you turn down the alley that leads to the clinic. That little brick building tucked between a smithy and a boarded-up bakery, smelling faintly of camphor and burnt toast. You're not sure what you're doing here. You could just walk past. Yeah, you just walk past. No one would notice. But something in your chest pulls you through the door. Inside it's quiet but not empty. A woman sweeping the floor, barefoot, red scarf tied around her head like a halo made of rags. She looks up, squints, then nods toward the back. You follow her glance and find the doctor hunched over a table, scribbling something that looks like numbers, or maybe poetry written in a language only the desperate understand. He looks up when he hears you, smiles. "Well," he says, "back to donate more sarcasm?" You shrug. "You still need help?" He waves a hand at the piles of boxes, the shelves of haphazard bottles, the stack of rags by the stove. "We always need help." So you stay. You unload jars of salve and jars of God knows what from crates labelled in French, sort linens that smell like vinegar, and wash bowls until your fingers wrinkle like forgotten apples. It's work, real work. No one praises you, no one corrects your posture. You just do it, hour after hour, until your breath fogs less and your thoughts settle into a dull hum. Around midday, the girl comes in clutching her stomach. She's maybe 12, dirty dress, hair matted with something that might be blood or just London. She's shaking, but she won't speak. You help her to a bench, fetch a blanket, and sit beside her. The doctor checks her over, says something low about starvation and infection. You don't hear the details. You're watching her face, trying to remember the last time you felt that kind of fear. Later, the doctor passes you a cup of broth and says, "Take a break." You sit on the stoop with the cup in your hands, steam curling up into the grey afternoon. The broth tastes like salt, onion and mercy. Across the street, a group of boys kick a ball made from bundled socks. One of them looks like Jonah, but when he turns, you see it's not. Just another face the city will probably eat. The girl from earlier is sleeping now. You check on her before going back to work. She stirs but doesn't wake. You pull the blanket higher over her shoulders. The hours pass in a way that feels like living. You don't think about the mission, or the courtyard, or even the rope room. You're just here, present, useful. When the sun begins to side down the sky, the doctor claps you on the shoulder and says, "You've done enough today. Come back tomorrow if you like." You nod. He hands you something wrapped in paper. Bread and half a bit of cheese, real cheese. You thank him, not out of habit, this time you mean it. You don't go back to the same sleeping spot, not tonight. Instead, you wander, past the river, past bridges etched with soot, past statues of dead men who never cared about the ones still breathing beneath them. You walk until your legs threaten mutiny and your foot pulses with every step. Eventually you find a place near a broken garden wall, overgrown with ivy and weeds so thick they're practically a mattress. You curl into the vines and eat your bread, cheese saved for morning. The sky's going violet now, stars trying to punch through the smog. You think about that girl. You think about the boy you thought was Jonah. You think about Nell and the dog and the fire barrel. You think maybe, just maybe, you're not just surviving anymore. You're starting to matter. It's a ridiculous thought. Too big for a night like this. But you hold it anyway. Because in a city like London, when the world is cold and the ground is harder than your luck, the only thing that keeps you going is the absurd idea that tomorrow might be different. And tonight, for once, you let yourself believe it. Historical fact? Some charitable medical clinics in 19th century London offered volunteer roles to the poor as orderlies or assistants in exchange for food, basic shelter or medicine. Quirky fringe fact. Certain London physicians kept gratitude logs of formerly homeless helpers who returned, documenting acts of kindness and practical work done, an informal moral accounting system. Open scholarly debate? There's disagreement among scholars about whether these clinics offered a real path out of poverty, or whether they created a dependent class of the gratefully useful. You wake tangled in ivy, dew clinging to your blanket like cold fingers. For a moment you don't move, not because of pain, though that's there, humming quietly in your foot, but because of how still the world is. It's one of those rare mornings when the city hasn't yet remembered how loud it's supposed to be. You can hear birds, real ones, not the squawking, ragged scavengers near the market, but soft-throated birdsong from somewhere in the overgrowth above your head. You breathe in, and the air doesn't smell like smoke or rot or meat fat. It smells like earth and damp stone. It's the kind of peace that makes you suspicious. You sit up slowly, your joints stiff but not unbearable. The bandage on your foot is still mostly clean, the edges crusted with dry mud. You flex your toes. Still there, still yours. You stretch, roll your shoulders, and unwrap the cheese from your coat pocket. It's gone a little oily in the night but hasn't turned. You eat it slowly in tiny bites, letting it melt on your tongue like it deserves a standing ovation. The bread follows, harder than yesterday, but it holds. You eat every crumb. This morning's meal feels like a haggadah and a stolen ritual. No one shouting, no one watching, no one demanding you trade a slice of yourself for a bite. When the city begins to rattle back to life, bells ringing from carts, shop shutters slamming up, you fold your blanket, tuck it under your arm and limp toward the clinic. This time your steps have a kind of rhythm. Not quite confidence. Not yet, but maybe purpose. They greet you with the kind of nod that means you again, without judgment. The red scarf woman waves you toward a bucket that needs emptying. You grab it without complaint. The doctor's already elbow deep in someone's broken arm. You slip into your work like a coat you've worn before. The girl from yesterday is still there. Awake now, sitting up, staring at a bit of lint like it might offer answers. You catch her eye. She looks away. You mop the back room, restock the bandages, and sweep the step where yesterday's boy hawked fake medicine. He's not there today. Either moved on or run off. You hope for the former. The clinic fills faster than usual. 2 boys with bleeding noses, a woman coughing blood into a handkerchief she pretends isn't rare, an older man with a stomach wound that smells like death. You help wherever you can, fetch wort, hold hands, clean what can be cleaned. You've seen enough pain to recognise it without words. By midday you're sweating through your coat. The doctor glances over and says, "You want a better gig?" You raise an eyebrow. He jerks his head toward the supply cellar. "We need a runner," he says. "Warehouse near Clerkenwell's got more gauze and laudanum. Take the cart, bring it back by dark, and I'll make sure you eat something that didn't start the day in a bin." You don't hesitate. The cart is rickety, the wheels squeal like pigs, and the road to Clerkenwell is long and uphill, but you don't complain. You push it with both hands, your foot dragging only slightly now. You pass chimney sweeps and bootblacks, milkmaids and mudlarks. You pass a man vomiting into a gutter, and 2 ladies pretending not to see him. You pass the bakery where you once stole a crust, and the rope house you slept in for a week, and the alley where someone disappeared last month, never to be mentioned again. All of it's still there, but it feels different. You're not in it in the same way. You're passing through it now, moving with a purpose the city can't dilute. At the warehouse, a man with arms like tree trunks squints at you and says, "You the runner from the charity lot?" You nod. He grunts, signs a slip and hands over a crate. It's heavier than it looks, filled with bottles that clink and slosh. You tie it to the cart, wrap it in rags to keep it from breaking, and start back. The sun's trying to burn through the fog, casting the city in a kind of yellow light that makes everything look more honest. You pause once near a water pump and splash your face. It stings, but in a good way. When you return, it's near dark. The doctor meets you at the door and says, "Took you long enough." Then he claps your back and adds, "But you didn't break a single bottle. That's a first." He gives you stew, real stew, bits of carrot, onion, something resembling beef. You eat until your stomach forgets how to complain. As the clinic empties out for the evening, you sit on the step and watch the street again. That girl, still there, wanders outside with a blanket draped over her shoulders. She sits beside you but doesn't speak. After a minute, you reach into your coat and pull out a crust you saved. You offer it. She takes it. Still no words. It's enough. Later, the doctor says, "You're good at this, you know. You could keep coming back." You don't promise anything, but you show up again the next day and the one after. You're not fixed. The world isn't fixed. But something has shifted. You've stopped floating. You've started showing up. Historical fact. Victorian clinics often relied on volunteer runners to fetch supplies or escort patients, especially as hospitals were overcrowded and underfunded. Quirky fringe fact. Some makeshift ambulances in London were nothing more than handcarts or wheelbarrows pushed by volunteers like the homeless or workhouse boys. Open scholarly debate. Scholars debate whether integrating the poor into clinic operations was empowering involvement or simply unpaid labour that masked underfunded infrastructure. It's easy to lose track of time in a city like London. Not the hour, that's shouted at you every time a church bell clangs or a milkman rattles his bottles, but the day, the week, the month. Everything blurs together in a shimmer of soot and sound. You can't remember how long you've been going to the clinic now, a few weeks maybe, or longer. All you know is that it's become something close to routine, which is as foreign to you now as a clean bed and a hot bath. Each morning you wake in the same ivy-nestled garden wall and stretch with the stiffness of a man twice your age. Your foot is mostly healed, though it still aches if you overdo it. You don't wrap it anymore, not unless you're hauling something. The blanket they gave you is threadbare now, patched with bits of sackcloth and string, but you keep it close like it owes you rent. It's yours. That matters. At the clinic they treat you like a fixture now. Not staff, not quite, but not a ghost either. Somewhere in between, the woman with the red scarf whose name you've learned is Elsie jokes that you clean better than the men who get paid for it. The doctors even started giving you errands with actual trust. He sends you to nearby neighbourhoods to check on sick tenants too weak to walk. Sometimes you carry soup in a tin pail, sometimes just a message. You don't ask questions, you knock, deliver and nod, that's the job. One afternoon you find yourself standing in front of a door in Bethnal Green. You knock, then push it open to find an elderly woman huddled on a mattress stuffed with hay. She's coughing wetly into her apron, and her eyes don't quite meet yours. You place the soup down on the stool beside her, and tuck the blanket higher on her chest without thinking. She looks at you, really looks, and says, "Are you one of the angels?" You shake your head. Not even close. But her fingers close around yours with surprising strength. You came anyway. You walk back to the clinic with her voice echoing in your chest. You came anyway. You're not used to meaning something to someone. You're not used to being expected, let alone wanted. At the clinic, a boy waits on the step. Not Jonah, but he looks the same age, with freckles and a tear in one boot. You ask if he needs help, and he shakes his head. "I'm looking for my sister," he says. "Red scarf, Elsie." You blink. "She's inside." He nods, but doesn't move. So you sit beside him, you don't talk. Eventually she comes out, sees him, and her whole face changes, softens, breaks. She grabs him and pulls him close, muttering curses and prayers into his hair. He wraps his arms around her waist like he's drowning. You never knew she had family. No one ever says anything about it later. Not her, not the boy, not the doctor. But there's a new mattress in the back room the next day, and the boy is sweeping the hallway with the same stubborn focus you had when you started. The city shifts around you, as it always does. Fog rolls in, freezes, lifts, and returns again. You pass old places and see new faces, some friendly, some gone. You hear rumours about a new outbreak, typhus maybe, or something worse. But at the clinic, no one flinches. You wash your hands more, scrub harder, say less. Then one cold morning, Nell returns. She steps through the clinic door like a question you never expected to hear again. Her hair's shorter, her cheeks thinner. The dog's still with her, tail low, eyes wary. She limps slightly and smells like coal smoke and old wood. But it's her. You stop dead, broom in hand. She sees you and smiles. "Thought you'd be dead by now," she says casually. "Same," you reply. She helps herself to a seat, nods to Elsie and accepts a tin of soup like it's the most natural thing in the world. No questions, no drama, but after a while she looks at you sideways and says, "Heard you're working here now, wearing a halo and everything." "Only on Sundays," you say. She laughs, not loud but real. She doesn't stay long, says she's just passing through, headed toward Camden maybe, or further still. Some friend of a friend says there's a job cleaning chimneys up there. Not glamorous to pay, yes, but it pays in coin, not sermons. You want to tell her to stay. You don't. You just give her your blanket. She grumbles, of course. What are you going to sleep in, a sermon? But she takes it anyway, tucks it under her arm like it's precious. Then, just before leaving, she leans in close and says, "You look better than the last time I saw you. Like you've got roots." You nod, but you don't know what to say. Roots. You've never had those before. That night you don't sleep under ivy or between crates. You stay at the clinic in the back where there's a spare cot now. You don't know when it became yours. Maybe it never did officially, but no one else takes it. And that in this life counts as ownership. You lie there in the dark watching the lantern light flicker on the ceiling. You think about Nell, about Jonah, about the old woman who called you an angel. You think about every rope you leaned on, every alley you slept in, every face you forgot just to survive. And you think maybe, just maybe, you're more than a shadow now. Not quite someone with a name, but someone with a purpose. It's not much, but it's more than you had. Historical fact. By the 1880s, some clinics and missions in London began offering permanent beds to their most reliable helpers, creating unofficial live-in caretakers from the ranks of the homeless. Quirky fringe fact. Some dogs, like Nell's, were semi-famous in local communities, known for guarding fires or sleeping outside clinics until their people came out again. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether those who found semi-permanent roles in these missions truly escaped homelessness, or merely created new versions of it under someone else's roof. By now, the clinic isn't just a place you work, it's the closest thing you've ever had to a heartbeat. The days take on a rhythm. Sweep, sort, deliver, clean, repeat. Faces come and go, but some return often enough to stitch a kind of pattern into your life. There's the coughing widow with the lace gloves she refuses to throw out even though the fingers are worn to threads. The shoe-black boy with ink-stained hands who always tries to trade polish for a cup of broth. The man who smells like turpentine and swears he used to paint murals in Westminster before his hands started to shake. They all pass through, like you did, like you still are, slipping between cracks, catching brief warmth before the cold creeps back in. No one says it aloud, but the clinic has become more than a medical stop. It's a soft pocket in the brutal coat of the city. People come for help, yes, but they also come to remember that they're still people, not criminals, not ghosts, not ink smears in a ledger. And you, somehow, impossibly, have become part of that. You notice things now. The way someone holds their arm when they walk, the tension in a jaw when they lie about how long it's been since they ate. You don't ask questions, but you learn answers anyway. You help them without making it obvious. A blanket folded just right, a bottle of oil left near someone's boots, half your bread slipped into another's pocket when they're not looking. Elsie notices. She watches you in that way women do when they've seen the world at its worst and still believe in small kindnesses. One night, as you're folding linens, she says, "You ever think about staying longer?" You glance at her. "I've been here for weeks." "I don't mean that," she says, tucking a corner tight. "I mean staying, putting down something that doesn't blow away the second it's kicked." You shrug. You've never known how to answer that. Every time you've thought about planting roots, the ground's shifted beneath you. But you don't say no. Winter is still clawing at the city, but it's softer now, like it's tired of being cruel. One morning, you step out into the street and realise, for the first time in months, you can smell something green, a hint of new growth buried deep under smoke and steam. You look up and see a tree or something close to it poking out over a fence. The buds aren't open, but they're trying. The city's thawing, and with the thaw comes danger. Because when people feel hope, they get careless. You see it in the faces of the street kids, laughing too loudly near policemen who never laugh back. You see it in the fire-gutted shell of a bakery that went up in flames 2 nights ago, because someone thought they could hide a stove in the back and run it through the night. And then there's the fight. It happens fast. A man storms in one afternoon, bloodied and limping, shouting about someone stealing his boots. You and the doctor try to calm him, but he's all fury and spit, swinging at ghosts. He knocks over a table. A bottle shatters. You step between him and the back room without thinking. He raises his hand to say, and something in you snaps. You don't hit him, not quite, but you push hard and baying. Enough to send him stumbling into the wall. He stares at you, startled, like he's just seen you for the first time. Then he slinks out, muttering. The doctor says nothing. Later, as you sweep up the glass, he kneels beside you and says, "You've got more fight in you than most." "I don't want to fight," you say. "Exactly," he replies. "That's why I'm keeping you." You stare at him. "Keeping me?" He stands. "I'll find a better bed. We'll register you under the name of your choosing. If anyone asks, you work here. Because you do, and if you want it, there's a room upstairs, small, cold, but yours." You don't answer right away. You finish sweeping, wrap this glass in paper, toss it in the bin. Then slowly you nod. The room is even smaller than he said. Bare walls, a narrow bed, a window that doesn't quite shut, but it's high up, and from it you can see rooftops, chimneys, a patch of sky, your patch. That night you sit on the bed, knees tucked to your chest, and listen to the sounds of the city below. The clinic creaks as it settles. You hear Elsie humming downstairs, the boy, her brother, snoring through his nose. The doctor rattling a kettle he probably forgot was boiling. It's not quiet, but it's not lonely. You reach into your coat and pull out the crumpled pamphlet from the mission, the one about redemption and moral rebirth. You never read it. You almost do now. Instead, you tear it into strips, not in anger, just to let it go. You're not a sermon, you're not a case study, you're not a headline. You're someone who made it through. You made it through the rope, the frost, the hunger, the night they turned you away, the alley you thought you'd die in, the kindness that scared you more than cruelty. You made it. You're not fixed, you're not whole, but you're here. And in a city that forgets people as fast as it chews them, that's a kind of miracle. Historical fact. Some charitable clinics eventually offered permanent lodging to trusted volunteers. especially during epidemics when help was scarce and trust even scarcer. Quirky fringe fact. A few clinics recorded ghost stuff in their ledgers, anonymous helpers who worked daily but never officially existed, often under names they gave themselves. Open scholarly debate. Scholars argue whether these semi-formal roles truly empowered the homeless or simply hid them behind charity walls, making their survival more palatable to the public eye. You sleep better now, not deeply, London doesn't allow that, but with fewer jolts, fewer nights spent listening for footsteps that mean danger. In the small upstairs room, under a blanket patched with your own hands, you lie still and listen to the wheezing rhythm of the building. It breathes with you now. The clinic has become more than a shelter. It's a lung, a heart. A place where you're no longer just passing through. Sometimes in the quiet you think about the rope room, the frozen nights, the girl on the slab, Nell by the fire barrel, Jonah with his tray of miracle cures. You remember the shilling in your hand, the loaf of bread that felt like treasure, the awful ache in your foot as you limped through streets that didn't care if you lived or died. You remember surviving. But now you do more than survive. You help set up before the clinic opens, you clean, you run supplies, you sit beside the coughing, the fevered, the desperate, and you stay even when there's nothing to give. People know your face now. They ask for you. They say your name, or at least the name you chose. You haven't forgotten what it was like. You can't. But that memory has become a spine, not a weight. You carry it because it reminds you what you're capable of. One morning, as fog curls along the windows and the city rattles to life, you light the stove in the clinic's back room, wrap your fingers around a chipped mug of weak tea, and listen to the first knock at the door. You open it. You let them in, because now you're the one who stays.